There's nothing more obnoxious than like the armchair critic, and I mean like critic shows from like I find them really unbearable now, especially like people who are like old timey critics. Like I used to write in a newspaper, and like now any guy with a blog is technically a movie critic. And one of the things I noticed about like that movie in particular,
well, it's almost like there's just like it's
like there were like two kinds of critics. Like there was like people like. You know, what's his name? Leonard Maltin.
Leonard Maltin, had his book out every year. My dad made sure we always got the New Year, and that's kind of where I got to read through all of them.
Yeah, and I remember he saw Batman v Superman, and he goes, when did the internet decide that these movies had to be no darn fun? It was like a very a gripey old man.
It was a very boomer
review.
Kind of point of view.
And I was like, oh, well, what about the deep running themes in the movie and the nods to Excalibur and the spear and like the movie references itself visually in a lot of different ways that are really interesting. What about that? I was like, I don't want to talk about that. I just want to why. And then like the other guy who was it was a big like 4,000 word essay that I read on the movie. And it was all about the metaphysical themes in the movie, particularly like gods and power. And
Snyder loves that stuff. That's why
that's his jam. Literally, if you watch Watchmen, that's his big thing.
I mean, with Watchmen, the focus so much on Billy Crudup as Dr. Manhattan. I keep thinking. Yeah, I got you right there.
Just careful.
A sticky situation. It's all right. But I can tell that was the part of the film he loved the most. Was like all the other stuff about the mystery of it, the Alan Moore's kind of noirish aspects, and then even
that's all still there.
It's all still there, and I hold that movie up pretty highly. I saw it in theaters, and going back into like superhero stuff, when me and my friends went to go see The Dark Knight, which I would frame to me as the beginning of me liking comic books, because I wasn't a comic book kid.
Ironically, the first superhero movie I saw, and like the first thing that got me into comic books was I saw a trailer for Zack Snyder's 300.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I saw the interesting thing about that movie is that movie gets a lot of great praise for some things, and it gets a lot of like criticisms for being like it's kind of a weird fascisty movie.
And it's that Frank Miller thing where he's always,
who is an insane person.
Yeah, and he's always kind of had those undercurrents of his politics, that has changed. I know he notably says, his politics changed dramatically after 9/11 and all that, but that's a whole different thing.
And I think people unfairly like wrapped up Snyder with making like all the good guys are white buff dudes and all the bad guys are brown people. And I was like,
Gerald Butler. Noted Greekman.
This movie is at its best a very fun tongue-in-cheek action movie.
And you're talking 300.
Yeah. And it is a propagandized myth of a story of a comic book.
Right.
Like
it has.
If you look at that movie and go like, wow, this is kind of propaganda-y, Snyder would go, you're absolutely right.
You're absolutely right. I may be doing that on purpose.
With that at all.
But it's like in a way, and for me with 300, I remember I saw 300 in theaters like 3 times, and I was mostly moved by, because I was in high school, I was about 15, 16 years old or so when 300 came out, and me and all my friends were kind of like amped by the overbearing machismo of it. We were like, this is a man's movie, and we're going to go to Taco Bell and have a man's meal.
When people say
it.
like it's very homoeroticism, like there's people like there's Snyder in interviews have been saying like, oh well, like like if you want to look at it that way, it definitely wouldn't, like the Spartans were a bisexual society. Like homosexuality was almost like it was kind of a thing where like if you could get away with it, it was encouraged in a way.
Right, which makes the one line I see that's brought up sometimes is when
a fine thrust.
A fine thrust. Yeah. Well, it's the line about when he's talking about the Athenians and talking
boy lovers.
Yeah, the Athenians and boy lovers, and it's like seems very
also
historically inappropriate because you guys were up to it just as much as anybody else.
Yeah, I think
just because they weren't stand my ground.
It's not that it's not that they wouldn't like boy lovers. It's that they would probably say, "Oh well, we're man lovers here because we're men. We're men.
What are you talking boys? We're all men, well shaved."
Yeah, and I think that
we got Micah Fassbender.
I remember when I first saw the trailer for that movie. There's that big shot of them throwing the Persians off the side of the cliff, and it's a big side parallel shot.
The trailer is what
and I saw that, and I had just started reading 300. I saw Sin City by Robert Rodriguez. I was like, oh, Frank Miller's noir stuff is the shit.
Is the shit.
And I started reading that, and then
use of color is so
and I saw it on some in like some online list of like, oh, great, like sort of avant-garde comic books or whatever, and this
more
was one
aesthetic
of
than story.
And I read that, and I got to that shot, and I was like, man, this would be a gorgeous movie, and I had no idea
that it was around the corner.
The dude who did Dawn of the Dead was going to do that movie, and then I saw that opening trailer, and I was like, and that's the opening shot of the trailer, and I was like, oh, I can't believe it.
I when I was it's a senior year of high school, and that was around the time for me, like I said, when 300 came out, and the memes around 300 were huge. The This Is Sparta and all that. That was early internet, like pre-meme comedy lore.
Yeah.
And so me and some friends for our senior year, we had to do a Shakespeare thing. We were doing Macbeth.
The best Shakespeare play, by the way.
It's fantastic. I can go on about that.
It's the best one. I'm not saying it's fantastic. I'm saying it's the best.
It's got some of the best adapts.
Yeah,
I've seen Throne of Blood more times than I can count. But we did the last scene of it with my video camera. We just shot like a short film of us doing like Macbeth versus Macduff and all that. But there's a scene where
did you see the Michael Fassbender one?
I was about to say I haven't seen it yet.
It's not bad.
It's that guy went on to do the Assassin's Creed film, and apparently that was secretly good.
There's an episode of the podcast, I think it might be the Venom episode, where I said I saw it in the bargain bin and I got it for $5 and I watched it and I was like, it's not a great movie, and I think, but there's some moments.
But it's got ideas underneath it.
No, not even the ideas. I was like, there's moments in the movie where I was like, it's like just like legit acting. Where I was like, if this were like, if this were
Fassbender, right?
Yeah, it's him. There's a team with him and Brendan Gleeson, and I was like, if this were two lesser actors, this movie would be bad. And it's about like it's the vengeance of him against his father, and how his father was an assassin and killed his mom. It's not a spoiler. It's in like the opening of the movie.
And I remember hearing people talk about that there's like this undercurrent of that the relationship was still between dad was an assassin, she was a Templar, and the whole thing and there's built out.
There's pieces of it like, oh, just like the games, the stuff in the past is more fun than the stuff in the present.
Exactly.
That's cool. There's a cool thing where once they all unlock their assassin's abilities or whatever, they have a big throwdown in the present day where like it's him and 3 other assassins versus like everyone in the thing, and it's pretty like action sequence wise. I was like, it's pretty good. But that scene with him and his dad, like his brother,
and it's Brendan Gleeson playing
his dad,
playing his pa.
Yeah, and then the guy who directed it is Justin Kurzel, who did Macbeth, and his little brother Jed Kurzel does the score.
Okay.
Yeah, and I have the score, and there's like this really drony score as they're talking. It reminded me very much of the end of Macbeth, where it's him versus Macduff, and it was like, I remember like it's like one of my favorite lines of the play, and it's like, you know, someone says "turn hellhound" to Macbeth, and it's Macduff, and then he turns around. I think that's he kills Seward or young Seward.
Yeah, young Seward.
And then Macduff enters the scene.
Which that's actually the scene that we did.
And Macduff says to him, "I'll have no words. My voice is in my sword." And the score wells up underneath it. And I was like, man, this is really like great filmmaking. It's really epic and intense. And I did feel shades of that. I think it's a fine movie at the end of the day. I wouldn't want to cover
Creed or
Assassin's Creed.
Yeah,
Macbeth is better.
I mean,
for sure.
It's in that trend of doing things with Shakespeare that's a little more historically accurate. Like what makes Shakespeare so great, and you can see this in so many different adaptations, is that time of setting doesn't matter. But that's one that it's like it is in medieval Scotland. And it is focused on that world. Yeah. You know, going back to one of my favorites, Throne of Blood, set in medieval Japan with Toshiro Mifune, is excellent in all kinds of ways.
Yeah.
But the going back to 300.
Yeah, like that movie, that
talk
version
about historical inaccuracies.
Yeah, and that's
meant for aesthetic. It's all stylistic.
When people I feel like critics get his movies so wrong in so many ways. Particularly, there's like the fun tongue-in-cheek ones, and then there's like the ones that he takes seriously. And I think the ones that he takes really seriously are kind of dumb and self-important, and that the ones that are kind of dumb and fun are actually like smart and subversive. And I think Zack Snyder would say, the only thing he was setting out to do with 300 was make like a fun, awesome like action movie that sort of believes its own hype.
Right, because wasn't it also more inspired by the 300 Spartans film from like the 50s or 60s?
Yeah, that's what Frank Miller based
the historical story about.
Yeah, and that's what
Frank Miller. Pulp.
Frank Miller based his book off that movie.
Film.
He saw that movie growing up, and he was like, "Oh, this is cool." That's where the line "like we will fight in the shade" comes from. It's from that movie,
and he likes that pulp, and then that's something that Snyder does so well is modern pulp, because that's. I mean, talking about Dawn of the Dead, when I first saw Dawn of the Dead, I still think that's a really good movie.
Yeah,
and I think again, balancing his thing of humor.
It's not my favorite, but it's like it definitely has like his. It's like a comic book movie that didn't have its own comic book.
Right, because he's still sharp colors, sharp editing, upping the stakes, because that was the first time it was like zombie culture was about to hit big and was about to become mainstream.
That was the
and
second
everything.
one. It was like 28 days later.
28 days later,
that came out like
and Dawn of the Dead
later.
came out. Shaun of the Dead was around that time as well, but that was more like for film nerds who are like, "Oh, Shaun of the Dead is the movie I rented a ton and loved to death." But that was right before it was about to hit, and then like Walking Dead was popular, and I think now we're kind of out of it a little bit, but I think think Dawn of the Dead was the beginning of that.
His opening scene is the best zombie opening in my opinion.
Yeah.
Like that like you go out into this neighborhood and it's just
and the ambulance swings by and everything. It's bright daylight. It's amazing.
There's that part where her husband just turned into a zombie and is chasing her down the street. Like,
he's
Jesus
got
Christ.
blood red eyes. It's horrifying. Yeah. And then he goes into what I love about Snyder the most, which is his openings.
Yeah,
you get that when the man
I
comes
hate that
around.
You just said that because I think his openings are good, but like whenever I see people say like the best part about Watchmen is the opening.
It's the opening with the Bob Dylan song.
Is it? I'm like, it's
I don't know.
Good.
I watch it every now and then.
I think it's. Here's why I think
it's chilling. It's like gets your
Here's why I think it's good and it's an example of his genius. But I think people sleep on the other parts of him that are great. I think when people talk about him, it always boils down to he's a style over substance guy. I think that's not true. I think his style is his substance.
I agree with you.
I don't think he likes
actually
saying things. I think he wants to
show things, and sometimes it doesn't always work. I've not, for instance, on Snyder, I've not seen Sucker Punch. But it's fine. That's one that I've heard mixed things regarding of what his intention was behind it. Yeah. But I've not seen it, so I won't go off on it. I just know what people said. It looks like something I would enjoy just from the over stylization.
As someone who never drops a point to bring him up in like movie conversations,
we're right off the bat.
I don't like that movie that much.
Yeah,
it's a feministy action movie, and its primary goal is to like turn women into like badass action heroes. Who
right, which that's a very
kind of like by way of 300. It's the same thing, but it's like women can own their sexuality and their own sort of.
Because there's that whole side
machismo.
Point in 300 with Lena Headey as the princess, where she's dealing with. Dominic West, I think, from The Wire.
Yeah,
and he's this scumbag who's working with which
is also not in the comic book.
No, that's
Snyder
a complete side point. He wanted that scene with her, but it's also kind of, again, it's more style than anything else, and it's it's got issues in terms of that. It doesn't feel as fleshed out as it should be, considering how dangerous it can get, considering how assaulted she gets and how rough this guy is. Because it's also a very anti-government kind of film as well, because it's like it has these old evil wizards who kind of run the show, and this sort of like
the E4s,
who have this sort of corrupt theocratic rule over everything, and it does feel this kind of like we need to leave this false democracy into this kind of new kind of thing, and I think it's weird sort of politics.
I think it is meant to be like that. That movie is a man's recontextualized, propagandized retelling of a battle that he was in, where he deliberately paints his king as the righteous hero.
It's that guy is telling the whole story.
Yeah, Stelios.
Stelios is telling the whole story. The guy who I thought would have at the time made a really good Solid Snake. He's got the eye patch. The
God saw fit to grant me with a spare. That's a great line.
God sometimes me with a spare.
And like, there's a great the way to watch that movie is like you can buy into some of the themes a little bit. I don't like thinking about it too much, because I think Snyder would want you to watch that movie and be like, man, those single take action scenes are amazing.
The use of sepia tone is
like
very
there's that part where like it's during the very first battle when they break rank and they just initially push the Persians back, and then they break rank, and Leonidas like goes out on his own and he pulls his sword, and it's kind of zooming in, zooming out.
Yeah, there's like these
slow-mo is accent,
and every time every time he hits someone with a shield, it's like
the earthquakes.
Percussive.
And I was like, it's like those are the kind of action scenes that made that dude like kind of second to none. In those genres. Even if you look at people like I like those Christopher Nolan Batman movies a lot. Those action scenes are not the strong suit of those movies.
Which I would say it's not supposed to be.
No, not at all. It's supposed to be a detective-y movie.
Right.
By the way, there's a guy who dresses like a bat.
There's a guy who dresses like a bat, and there are
Christopher Nolan will tell you, he's like,
I
I don't even like comic books because I just kind of like Batman.
It's somehow he went ahead and made a story that works so well.
How did we get here? We got so far in this.
Yeah,
I was saying the Watchmen opening sequence. Why I think that opening sequence is great, but not the best, but great is I think I was a
big Bob Dylan fan at the time. So hearing that, I was like, oh my god, that's great.
Because it's not in the comic book. Obviously, you couldn't put something like that in a comic book.
But
like,
all the shots going time to time are all exposition.
Yeah, he simultaneously shows you the history of this world and
the history of these characters.
He juxtaposes it to American history, which makes it feel extremely real. Like he shows
it's an alternate universe story. It's an alternate timeline story.
Yeah, Nixon got reelected.
Nixon gets reelected. We won Vietnam.
Yeah, you see. Like Dr. Manhattan shaking JFK's hand. You see JFK's
assassinated by the comedian.
You see like the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki and stuff with like the Sally Jupiter's like painting on.
We see that the culture of superheroes has permeated our world, which was Moore's whole deal is like, is that good or is that
and there are
bad?
Batman and there are Superman comics on the back wall as the first Night Owls decking that dude.
And I noticed, and some people said that if you look in the background, it looks like there's Martha and Thomas Wayne right there.
And I feel like the best way to watch Watchmen is sort of as in the same way that like I feel like a lot of people see that movie and they see his Slater superhero movies, which I actually think are better than Watchmen.
And I haven't seen Justice League. I mean,
Justice League is not his movie.
Man of
Steel and BVS.
Well, BVS did turn me off in such a way that I didn't follow up with Justice League. But like you said, it was a mixed bag. Because who else co-directed that?
Well, what happened was he was all the way done with principal photography, and they were 5 months into like editing and visual effects and stuff. And his daughter,
his daughter died, and he had a personal tragedy and had to leave away.
And then Joss Whedon came in.
And
it is a shit show of a movie. And there's not
because I've also heard people say they like it more.
Yeah,
but
then the people that like it are probably the people that I'm not trying to throw shade. Tend to like
the Marvel fans.
Well, they because there are Marvel movies I think are great and cutting edge too, but they like the very formulaic stuff. They need lots of jokes. And there's like lots of recycled Whedon jokes. Remember in Age of Ultron when Bruce Banner falls on like Scarlett Johansson's boobs and is like, oh my god, like that joke happens again with the Flash and Wonder Woman. And there are moments of it that I like. And,
it's very Whedon-y humor.
And because of that, like after it's been almost 2 years since that movie came out, and like Snyder has just been on his social media accounts just releasing all sorts of and my version Darkseid was there, and you saw like the new Jack Kirby's New Gods at the end of the movie, and
he had this whole and obviously something was missing with like you said the meta. The deeper thing that Snyder likes to get to, playing with metaphysics, playing with culture, playing with things like that.
There was time travel things that were going to be opened up. You remember Batman v Superman, where Batman has
a vision, and all of a sudden, like the Flash, I think shows up, and it's like it's all related to Lois Lane.
That's referenced in the movie. Or that was going to be referenced in his Justice League cut is reportedly basically finished. There's like some visual effects that need to be finished and like some sound stuff.
Is that the hashtag release the Snyder cut? Because that also has a lot of like
his version is like
asshole connotations because there's a lot of assholes behind it.
There's plenty of
but that's fan culture.
There's plenty of online fan culture, but here's 3 things that I know. Like people like Jay Oliva, who is Snyder's storyboard artist on like Man of Steel, Batman v Superman 300, I think was one of them as well.
So he's his longtime guy.
Yeah, and he's like, Snyder does not he shoots everything that he draws, because Snyder is like famously for Watchmen, he storyboarded the entire movie out. And he shot it. He never shoots like more than he needs. He shoots everything that he wants to shoot.
Everything has a purpose for him.
Yeah. And like he goes, there were visual effects shots done before like we were even finished with principal photography. The actor who plays Steppenwolf has said verbatim, I just saw Justice League. That wasn't the movie I worked so hard on. I hope the director's cut is released because it was a much better film.
And that was David Fulis?
No, that's the guy who plays Ares.
Oh, okay, yeah.
By the way,
Steppenwolf,
there's a big like Lord of the Ringsy Mordor battle in Justice League where you see Steppenwolf's first invasion of Earth, and it was like Justice League 10,000 BC, where like the Greek gods came down and fought against him. And the actor and it's like earlier versions of Ares and Zeus. They're like more savage. They have like bone necklaces, and they look very. It's very 300.
It's very kind of like
there's a part
DC.
You see a green
DC BC.
Yeah, you see a Green Lantern. Which was like
they haven't touched on that.
Yeah, it was one of the coolest parts of the movie, and you can tell Whedon cut that down so much because it's such a short part now. But they fight Steppenwolf. Like you see Zeus like shoot up his lightning, and you see like Ares come down. He has a big axe, and he like crushes into his armor. And what that was supposed to be is that wasn't Steppenwolf. That was Darkseid.
Oh, okay. He was going to bring in like this. If you guys have your Thanos, I've got Darkseid. Yeah, who's kind of the Thanos of DC in a way.
Yeah, or
I'm sure some people would drag me through the coals for that, but that's my limited knowledge.
It is. It's like it's opposite. Thanos is Marvel's Darkseid. Because the guy who created Thanos was Jim Starlin. He goes, we need to create a character who's like a galactic sort of conqueror, and he's kind of like Jack Kirby's Darkseid. He literally said
Darkseid's whole thing is he's the anti-life equation.
Yeah, he's after the anti-life, and you see the anti-life in that movie. But you don't know that you see it because they cut out any reference to it. There's a part in the movie where you see Steppenwolf lifts his axe up and he slams it into the ground. So
the way it sounds like is that
they cut out
Snyder's ultimate theme underneath it was talking about when he literally means like gods on earth, he's going back to the Greco-Roman idea of gods were living on earth or some kind of a multidimensional way.
Yeah, and the stunt guy who played Ares for that fight said, "Oh, I wasn't fighting Steppenwolf. I saw the movie. I was fighting Darkseid, and all of the Greek gods and the Green Lantern like come together, and they come together, and it's like they speak to each other." But there's no dialogue in the Whedon version of the movie.
It's just overlaid background noise.
And Cyborg's character was supposed to be the heart of the film. He's a dark character who like loses everything that he holds dear. At the end of the movie, he enters one of the mother boxes. Darkseid speaks to him, tells him he'll give him back everything he ever wanted if he lets like Apocalypse come to Earth, basically. The Flash time travels in it, but that doesn't happen in this version. And any reference to like Bruce Wayne's nightmare is completely cut out. And that nightmare was going to be like Justice League Part 2 or 3, where they fight Darkseid, they lose, and it takes place on that hellscape
in a leather duster future.
Yeah. Where Batman is killed, and he tells the Flash or whatever, if anything ever happens to me, you have to go warn me what's coming. That's what you see.
If I get cut in half by Batman or by Superman, you got to go back and fix this.
Yeah, and the thing was, like, the Flash, and like sort of a broken, dilapidated Cyborg say, like, we have two windows where the Earth will be in the exact right part of space where we can do it. And Bruce Wayne tells Cyborg, all right, if you didn't have to ask me, which one would you send the Flash through to warn me? And he goes, I would use this one. He goes, use the other one. Because he used that one, and he showed up in my Batcave, and he was shouting nonsense, and I didn't understand.
So it didn't work.
That's okay. And the same way we are confused when the Flash shows up, and he was like, "Oh my God! Like, what
that's
Lois
a
Lane
point.
Is the key? What do you? Like, yeah, that's Bruce Wayne's reaction.
Right.
And the other window is about a minute before Darkseid boom tubes into the Batcave and murders Lois Lane, succumbing Superman to the anti-life equation and bringing about.
And that's what they mean by that. But that's all. That all is either cutting room floor or is in this cut that's not
the seeds for it are in his movie. That wouldn't be his Justice League movie. That would be Justice League 2 or 3.
Right. This would be the beginning of a trilogy.
There was the actor who plays Darkseid is a guy named Ray Porter, and he's over like when people ask him like, oh my God, there was a Darkseid in his movie, because all the online like movie media people were like, oh, that's not true, it hasn't been substantiated, and then a bunch of people went to his Twitter account and were like, were you Darkseid in his movie? And he's like, I'm just over here quietly obeying my NDA agreement, basically confirming I was.
Question.
And then Zack Snyder just like throws caution to the wind and goes, oh, here's that picture, here's Darkseid during that flashback.
Well,
they take out Darkseid and they put Steppenwolf over him.
They just impose something.
And I was like,
him.
so Justice League is like, it's like, it feels like a very typical, like, stripped down light version of the Avengers. It has its moments. It's not my favorite.
Because the time travel, time jumping thing recalls to me Endgame a lot with Ant-Man and one of the parts I actually really enjoyed about it was the whole
and keep in mind Snyder had that stuff planned out before Batman v Superman was even finished.
He sounds like a guy who is like, I've got my arc in mind.
Yeah, and it was going to be like a huge, like, it was, the whole thing was like a Superman arc. It's like Lois, that's why in Batman v Superman, Lois, this is my world, you are my world. And when he kills Batman in that dream, he says, she was my world, you took her from me. So when she dies, it opens him up to the anti-life, which helps Darkseid conquer Earth. And I don't know, like it sounded like an insane idea, but like I'd rather see that than what I got in the regular version. And anyway, we have waxed nostalgically enough where the fans are pulling their hair out about enough with the Snyder talk.
It is a thing where it's like, because Snyder's able to say like this was my plan all along. Yeah, it kind of deflects criticism of certain things.
Yeah, and I'm sure there would still be people who are like, it's too dark. It sounds like a bunch of genocide would probably happen. I was like, it sounded like it's all in presentation. You know, if Thanos snaps his finger and half the universe is killed, no one seems to mind. But like if Batman kills people in Batman v Superman, everyone loses their fucking mind. And I kind of don't care about either.
And it's like, I think getting to that's.
We need to stop talking.
Right, and I think I'll just wrap it up. We'll
have an episode where we talk further about this.
It sounds like we could for a while.
It's fun, yeah.
Tone means so much, and I think Marvel's tone versus DC's approach to tone shapes how we see those things.
Yeah, what Marvel does great is building a cohesive universe where. You have a guy sort of at the top like Kevin Feige who says, well, you can't do this, you can't do that. But in exchange for that, you get like a homogenized tone. Whereas Snyder's deal was like, he didn't necessarily want to be the guy at the top saying yes and no. He wanted to give people the ability to make their own movies. So when Patty Jenkins makes Wonder Woman, it's her movie.
It's her movie.
And it's her artistic perspective. And Aquaman is 100% James Wan's movie. Shazam is David Sandberg's. And all my favorite DC movies have that. They have this great artistic perspective, and they all feel and look different. Even Suicide Squad, which I don't like, feels like a David Ayer movie. Yeah. Man of Steel feels,
for better or worse, it's got that David Ayer thing going with it.
And like Man of Steel feels like a Zack Snyder movie.
That it does.
Yeah, it's so like I kind of prefer that model, even if there are Marvel movies that I like more than certain DC
because
movies.
Marvel does the whole thing where it's like every film is also the director's take on it in their personal involvement, but they are kind of like edges. You have to stay within. You can use all the crayons you want, but don't go out of the lines. But also every film, for the most part, is a different genre. And I find that
I find
they could go further in some situations. But we'll see what happens.
The benefits and drawbacks tend to be. Some of the movies from Marvel feel very boring, very homogenized. The scores are very forgettable.
Because I remember you were talking about Civil War, or was it Ryan talking about Civil War?
Maybe, yeah.
And that's one of the ones I don't like the most because, like, one of my favorites is Winter Soldier, and that's because that's
one of Ryan's favorite too.
Feel like a spy thriller. Like the government is secretly corrupt, and everything is a lie, and we're on the run.
Also, it turns
3
Captain
Days of
America.
Condor,
it makes Captain America like into a badass, whereas his first movie was kind of like, who cares?
Well, it's like he is a man on the run, Jason Bourne style, with only his morality meaning something.
Yeah, and you get movies
that's tight.
And you'll get some unique movies, but the drawback is you'll get like Thor: The Dark World, or like you'll get like Iron Man 2s and 3s, and you'll get like I didn't like Captain Marvel very much. I thought it was really boring, and like you'll get movies
they're serviceable. They're not bad, but
they're bland.
They fit. I think I agree with like Dark World and Iron Man 2. Stands out for me as one that's like, well, that it had some cool things. It's got Sam Rockwell. I'm always gonna like Sam Rockwell.
Yeah, but in exchange for that is like I find that DC tend to be better risk takers, whereas Marvel might be more cohesive world builders.
There's definitely a bigger conversation to be had about this.
Let's talk about movie news. Let's talk about Last Jedi, Rise of Skywalker trailer.
Yeah, talking about fandoms that are burning down in front of us.
Look, there's shit. There's plenty of shit coming out of plenty of assholes everywhere. So
well, it's like you. I think you were talking about. We could talk about the last one, The Last Jedi. Up and Down. That's a movie I could talk about for a whole thing. But I finally
the fandom around that movie is the worst I've ever seen, and I think the thing.
Yeah, it's the most controversial film in the last 20 years.
I would say.
Wild.
I would say like. I would say it's up. I would say Batman v Superman might be more because I see more video essays like. There's plenty of people saying like The Last Jedi is terrible, or like another video, The Last Jedi is a masterpiece.
Right.
I find both of those movies are very similar in the way that like they subvert your expectations and they divided a lot of people.
And that line of subverting the expectations has been sort of the earthquake.
And I
fandom.
find that, and some of the fandoms can be really gross and really toxic. I find the Snyder Cut people just get really upset when people pretend like it doesn't exist.
Right.
There's like Snyder did like
they start building into conspiracy. Like you can't tell me it doesn't exist. I've seen it.
Well, yeah, but
it's real.
No, it goes even further because like Snyder did a 3-day weekend where he watched the 3 director's cuts of his films at this Wisconsin college he went to, and at the end of the Batman v Superman one, he got a bunch of Justice League questions where he answers all the stuff that I just told you.
Yeah, so
and he does a fan Q&A where he signs people, and then one guy asks him, like a lot of people ask him point blank, is there a Snyder Cut? And he goes, oh yeah, and he goes, is it like how close is it to being done? He's like, yeah, it's pretty much done. There's like maybe some visual effects stuff. He goes, how long is it? Oh, on the poster he gives everyone when they walked into that event, he has the runtime in a little circle up there just for people. That's like he knows he's not an idiot. He knows that people want
on a
this
file
movie
somewhere.
Yeah. And by the way, last week Jason Momoa saw it.
Oh wow!
Aquaman.
Okay.
And he said he posted on Instagram. He gave Snyder a Leica camera because he's like, "Oh, you saved my life. You gave me Aquaman. You helped revitalize my career. I love you so much." And then he goes, "Oh, by the way, the Snyder Cut was sick." And so like, I mean, it's getting harder to deny that it's not real.
But then you also have to think like, is this all just some really, really good marketing? Like, is this thing going to drop randomly?
You can look at the trailers.
Like,
you can look at the trailers, and you can look at things that were in those trailers that aren't in the movie.
That aren't in the final cut.
There's a part where like Cyborg is crying in the movie, and he's holding onto the mother box, and he turns his head up to the sky and screams, and like that was probably where he screams out to Barry, and Barry rewinds time to stop it from happening.
But then it's just like, meow, it's gone.
Yeah, and I was like, that sounds cooler. Anyway, toxic fandom,
Star Wars.
Keep your points, mostly factually based. Not saying you can't be passionate, but don't be mean. Don't be mean to the chick who plays Rose either. She's a perfectly nice.
Yeah,
person.
What
did you think of the Rise of Skywalker? Sneak peek, which is almost nothing.
Because I think I told you I wanted to at this point, because of, especially after The Last Jedi and everything leading up to this one, I wanted to stay. I was like, I'm going trailer only. But I went ahead and watched it, and so going back to what we were talking about like things we grew up with that we're passionate about. You guys were talking DC. Some people talk DC. Some people talk about Tolkien. Some people talk about things that they're like.
I love all those things.
What was that now?
I love all those things.
Star Wars is my lore. There is nothing that I'm going to walk away from, even the worst thing, and be like bummed out by it. Even recently, like the new films, the Disney saga has made me look back on. Not the prequels as individual films, but as a whole, thematically, makes sense to me more. Even if I don't like those movies as products.
Attack of the Clones is one of the worst things I've ever seen.
It's the execution of all of them is garbage.
Revenge of the Sith is quite watchable.
It's got some satisfaction to it.
It's got that great opera house scene.
Yeah, it does. And but going back to what we've seen right now is so. Of this, like, what was it? Maybe less than a minute. It was just like, oh, we're just going to show you all the things. I was watching it and I was like, yep, this is A New Hope. This is everything. They're building up this emotion. Like, this is the end. This is the end of it. And yeah,
but we know it's not going to be the end. Rian Johnson's going to direct some new movies about it.
And like, I mean, this is a whole thing. Like, this would be like the climax of a discussion about this, but you can't end it like with episode 9 when you can finish it up with an episode 10, like a final thing. But that's in my own fanboy head. Like, what would an episode 10 be? But we won't know after this whole thing.
So given that we only saw like 30 seconds of new footage.
We saw the one thing I've loved the most about it is everyone just being like, is that an evil possessed C-3PO? Because he's got these big red eyes, and I'm like, I'm all in for that if that's going to mean something.
Sure. Who cares about C-3PO?
I don't know. C-3PO getting all demonically possessed.
I'm perfectly happy with him being like slowly written out of these movies as we go forward.
They kind of have. Pulled him out. I mean,
he has more lines in Rogue One than he does in The Last Jedi.
That he does. Yeah. Well, it's almost like, you think about, Kenny Baker has passed, Peter Mayhew has passed, Anthony Daniels is the last of the costumed guys to still be rocking, and he's still in that outfit, and I wonder, what they're going to do with that, but going to obviously the big thing that came out of it, which is the Dark Ray thing.
Is it a dream sequence? Is it not? I'm feeling those arguments a lot.
And that's one thing, talking about The Last Jedi, and like you said, we can have a whole conversation about this, is the one thing I absolutely don't like, but I can justify it enough, is I don't need flashbacks in Star Wars. I don't like flashbacks in movies unless it's part of the aesthetic. Star Wars, the series, so far has never had to use a flashback. In The Force Awakens,
I mean, they kind of do in Empire. He goes into the tunnel and he fights Darth Vader, which is
but that's not so much a
flashback. Not a flashback. It's like a weird.
That's a vision.
Dreamscapey thing.
Yeah, because it doesn't cut back to anything.
Yeah,
it is occurrence.
Also, let me just preface this by saying J.J. Abrams is a liar and will lie to you in the marketing for his movies. Well, in the build up to Star Trek 2, they were like, "Is Benedict Cumberbatch Khan?" He was like, "Absolutely
no, his name is John something or other."
And then like when the movie rolls around, he goes, "I am Khan." I was like, Abrams, you bastard!
And that's a really weak like
reveal.
Yeah, it's like, no, then stick to your guns and say, oh, his name is John Smith, and then like halfway through the movie, John Smith's like, actually, I prefer going by Khan. You know, it's like the whole thing they did.
And be like this.
Yeah, I'm Khan Noonien Sin, clearly a British white man.
I sincerely doubt Abrams would give away a reveal like that.
No, unless
I think it's like the end of his one of his final Force Awakens trailer where you see Finn light up the lightsaber
and you see
Kylo Ren come towards him and right. Oh, that's going to be the big battle. And it's
an edit Ray. Yeah. It does recall to me one of the things that I love about Return of the Jedi, which I think because we have all grown up with Star Wars, I feel like I knew all about where Star Wars was going before I was even born. That's how inundated it is in our culture. Yeah. That the opening of Return of the Jedi, when Luke comes to back to Tatooine to Boba Fett's lair,
Jabba the Hutt.
Jabba the Hutt's lair. Yeah. Boba Fett's there. Jabba the Hutt's
lair,
where Boba Fett is there. He shows up and he's cloaked. He's got the black hand and he's not taking any BS. And he's just like, "You will give me what I want." And they're almost, if you were in the audience in 1983, you might have been thinking like, "Is he going evil?" Yeah. Obviously, he's not. We know that now. But there is a moment.
She could have a red lightsaber, be dressed in black for all sorts of reasons.
Yeah, that could be a whole bait and switch thing. That lightsaber's pretty dope. It's impractical as all get out, but
it's gonna cut your leg off. You're gonna be thinking it's like this way, and it's gonna be this way. You'll,
but the good thing in the Star Wars world, losing limbs means nothing. Like everybody's got a prosthetic. That's true,
limb. But it's still gotta really hurt. So you should be careful.
That's why they get cauterized so fast.
So you're just kind of mum is the word on whatever it is.
Yeah, I just want to see what happens. I mostly am excited, not like I want it to be over, but I'm ready for it to be over. So that everything that's happened since The Force Awakens, we can now look at it from a retrospective and be like, as a whole, the saga itself completed. We can now look at it as a whole and really kind of ingest it as what it is now. For better or for worse, some people are going to see it, obviously lesser. I have a positive take on
I'm mixed,
and Ryan Johnson's as well.
I'm mixed to positive on all of it as well. I will absolutely say The Force Awakens is kind of a retread. I will say that
it plays
The Last Jedi does make choices that I don't like or that I find are boring.
Safe.
And I will say that Rogue One is kind of a mediocre movie that is saved by amazing battle sequences, as my friend Ryan puts it.
I
also that awesome Darth Vader scene.
Yeah, I remember I was hearing you guys talk about that, and that actually made me think about
we talked about the fact that
the sense of humor.
Yeah, 2 years ago we had
the ironic sense of humor that Vader seems to have.
Yeah, and I was like, it is in keeping because he's perfectly willing to choke someone to death and make a joke about it.
He's sassy as all get out.
Yeah, so me and Ryan had that argument years ago.
It's just so weirdly missing in Christensen's performance, but you guys already treaded on that. Rogue One is a movie that when I first saw the info, I'm like, oh, good. Star Wars is getting a Dirty Dozen in space. Yeah, I want a raw Dirty Dozen kind of thing.
And you get kind of that.
You get kind of that.
You get a Dirty Four in space, and there's some other people.
And I was like, I loved the characters. I like the characters a lot. Going back to talk about Ben Mendelsohn, Hollywood's great slimeball, as Orson Krennic. I loved his aesthetic. I loved his design. I liked that Imperial white outfit.
I loved CGI Governor Tarkin.
That's a whole. I thought about that the other day.
I'm kidding. I don't like that. I think it's weird.
As somebody who does acting, I'm like, oh God, we're done. We're just going to bring people back from the dead, whether they like it or not. But that's a whole moral issue.
Yeah,
that we can go down.
Give their families royalties and stuff.
Yeah, I'm sure the Cushing family got a nice lump sum. I liked Solo quite a lot.
Yeah, I liked it too.
I
even like that Darth Maul thing at the end. Now I know we're never going to see that in a movie ever, and I'm never like, see that again. Bullshit.
Well, that's all because the cartoon series and everything are all this extra canon that.
But that's the first time they've
propped up in all that.
That's the first time they've pulled something from
that world.
It's like the Avengers movies pulling something from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and
exactly.
making it in their movie.
And I was like, oh my God, wow. Or if they were pulling from the Netflix series and it's like during the Battle of New York.
I would watch a Darth Maul movie where it's like the raid where he's killing people in a building.
Oh my gosh.
It'd be great.
Don't tell me. Now you got me writing that screenplay in my head. I spent a lot of time with Star Wars just like writing fan scripts in my head.
Of course.
And I think we'll be getting to it after we talk about this. But
put him in a Disney Plus series.
Yeah.
Well,
have him show up.
Speaking of Mandalorian, let's talk about that.
Please. This is what I'm most excited.
I thought the footage was cool. I want to feel like, I mean, this is such a like nitpicky thing. Mm-hmm. I want to feel that when Kylo Ren and Rey finally duke it out, I want it to be good. Make it a good fight, please.
It's all for me.
They've really pulled their punches on these lightsaber fights.
I mean, we could talk speculation about what this is going to be.
Like the Last Jedi fight is cool, but it's also cool. I want to see a red saber and a blue saber go at. Like,
and I want, if it is going to be that, it needs to make sense, raw. It doesn't need to be swinging around in a lava planet like at the end of Revenge of the Sith.
Although I do kind of like that.
Again, spectacle. Spectacle's great. But this is so, for one thing, Kylo Ren to me is in my mind, one of the best characters to come out of Star Wars ever.
Because
he's an accumulation.
For a lot of people who hate these movies, he's the redeeming character.
And it is a lot of Adam Driver's performance, but it's also how he's written and what he means. The idea of his character is so important, I think, for the audience. Again, we can talk speculation about it. Yeah. I feel that what we're seeing in these trailers all depends on where it's going to be in the movie.
Yeah. We know Palpatine's probably coming back. We heard his gross voice.
I love it. I've got a speculation about that regarding someone else who has been cast in that film.
Yeah.
I'm very happy to see one of my favorite actors, Richard E. Grant, is going to be this Allegiant general. It's like apparently there's this, after Kylo Ren took Force as the supreme leader, poor little Domhnall Gleeson's character, I can't recall his name at the moment.
General Hux
has joined up with Richard E. Grant, and they're forming their own side thing to be like, we've got to return the First Order to real glory since this lunatic has taken over.
Yeah,
and
is he a lunatic? I feel like he's probably more rational than some of the other people.
Hux's mind. He is.
Yeah, but Hux is a lunatic.
Yeah, Hux is a little fashy boy.
He does. Yeah, he does like a big like alt-right salute in The Force Awakens.
And that's also he's an alt-right fanboy of.
You should get a scrub brush for that pot and kettle.
But it's I'm very interested to see where that's going to go, because I think this idea of the Emperor still being a force of evil, like even beyond death, I think that could either really work as a summation of everything in the series so far.
It would make him the best like overarching villain.
Yeah, because his rise in the prequels is one of the best parts of that whole thing.
Yeah.
And the fall of the Jedi Order as a thing is the most exciting thing about that.
Yeah, it would prove his foresight is very good at the least, but you got to do it good. Yes. If it's just like, I'm a Jedi can be Force ghosts, I can be Force ghosts too. Like that's not going to be satisfying.
I was the evil ghost behind it all, and it's like if that doesn't land, then it's gonna be disappointing.
Yeah. So Mandalorian. I thought it was really dope. I was surprised at how good it all looked, especially considering that it's like a TV series, and usually they pull the punches on the budget. But Disney probably poured a lot of money into this because all the visual effects looked on point, especially the space battle part that I saw.
What I was saying earlier about I wished Rogue One was a little more like the Dirty Dozen in space. This seems a little more closer to what I want, which is using the Star Wars universe for what I really love about it is that its roughness, its gruffness, and everything around the corners is so fun. My hope about this is that it's gonna be kind of like, and this is the first thing that came to my head. It
feels very much removed from like the last
greater story.
Jedi. Well, the Last Jedi, because the Last Jedi looks like a very everything. Even like when they visit like the slave planet, it's very posh and nice and clean looking. And I was like, where are the murderers and criminals in this thing?
Where are these scumbags? This. I kind of hoping that it's episodic in the same way, like, and I don't know why this is the first thing in my head, but like Samurai Jack. If you ever watch Samurai Jack.
Yeah, I watched Samurai Jack.
How every episode is like, he goes into a situation, it is something specific to the episode,
and
it's
it has
a lot
no
of fun,
real continuity,
and he walks away. I'm hoping that this is what this is. Like, it's very clear. It's like there are characters who are going to be showing up over and over.
Werner Herzog is in it.
Werner Herzog in this is... Being a bounty hunter is one of the most exciting things.
Being a bounty hunter is dangerous, yeah.
Werner Herzog being in Star Wars, it's secretly something I love the most about this right now, because it's just like, it's the end of what Herzog stands. This Star Wars, the war itself is within the metaphysics of humans and the darkness between spaces. My name is Werner Herzog. You're now watching the Disney Channel.
Watching my masterclass or whatever.
Put the blaster down, please.
I liked I wanted, the only thing I wanted was like, it was like a lot of atmosphere and not a lot of. This show does not have much longer until it comes out. So like, I want to see some action. I want to see a thing that makes me go, this is going to be great.
Yeah.
Like, everything looks great, but I don't have that thing. Like, it was a bunch of really build up music, and there's that part at the end where like you see him cable a guy's foot, and he
gets sliced in half by the door, and it's got a Mexican standoff sort of deal going on.
That was cool.
That's something. Going back to Rian Johnson for a second, that looks like a world Rian Johnson would do good in.
Yeah.
Because
he did Looper and Brick,
where
are like these noir films.
And
Looper has terrifying death scenes in it. There's a part where a guy's limbs disappear and stuff.
It's horrifying.
No bueno.
And he loves dirty, rustic sci-fi. He's a fan of like space western anime things. He's a Cowboy Bebop fan, and that's what Mandalorian reminds me of, is that kind of like episodic, he's a Clint Eastwood like western kind of man with no name who just comes into a situation and either resolves it or it falls apart in front of him and walks away.
I mean, this has a lot of people in it. There's Werner Herzog.
Carl Weathers.
Carl Weathers is in it. Gina Carano. A lot of great people directing. Taika Waititi, who I'm kind of mixed on after Thor Ragnarok, to be honest.
I heard that Bill Burr's going to be in it too, which will be a lot of fun.
That would be hilarious. Oh my God.
Hey, Mandalorian.
Yeah, it's Bill Burr. We're doing the Monday morning podcast from the middle of the Outer Rim.
We're doing the Mos Eisley podcast.
Have a good day.
The blue milk is getting really sharp today.
I would watch that episode.
The cast is looking great. I'll watch anything with Taika Waititi. He's voicing, I guess, IG-88 shows up in it, which got my fanboy.
Or a droid that is like IG.
It's an IG. It's because in the now non-canon Star Wars world, IG-88 had 3 quote-unquote brothers or twin.
Think we're gonna see the lizard guy?
Bosk? Bosk? I hope.
That'd be cool.
I want to see. I want to see good old mummy-headed Dengar. I want to see some Dengar, maybe played by Simon Pegg because he voices him in the cartoon.
Yeah, I want to see. I want them to convince me of like, one, I want some lore. You have the opportunity to like tell a long form story format over like 10 to 12 episodes. You can cover so much ground. I want to know about Mandalore, old Jedis, what's going on in between the end of Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens. You've got all this stuff to play around with.
I want to know about what was that gap between the fall of the Emperor's Empire and the beginning of the First Order.
Yeah, that's something that I felt Solo did pretty well in their little.
We got to see the beginnings of it. One of my favorite parts of that is like the early Han as a soldier, like in the Imperial Army, and you saw how
lots of great world building. I want great world building. I want to keep it grimy and keep it as close to R-rated as Disney will let you. Like that's
something that we love Star Wars for. Right, a world building.
Let's talk about something boring where my opinion is going to be vastly different from yours. I bet. Spider-Man is out from the MCU.
Yeah,
apparently, and I'm kind of happy about it.
It's obviously most of this has less to do with, and like you said, I care not as much. But mostly I'm looking at it from the
weep not for the $1 billion studios that is Disney. Yeah.
which is that
Disney owns everything.
Disney owns everything. I'm not trying to be a cynic about it, but it's a concept I don't care for. They got everything.
They've got Fantastic Four and the X-Men from Fox now.
Which good luck, making that happen. Fantastic Four is a death knell.
I don't want to. And you can say what you want. Like, the problems that I have with the Marvel Universe are also problems that I see in the new Star Wars movies. Is they're kind of corporate-y feeling. They feel very four-quadrant-y at times, and I want to keep as much artistic expression in our movies and our television as possible.
Right.
To be fair to Disney/Marvel, they do also create things like Daredevil and stuff on Netflix.
They allow things to get a little hairy. I mean, Jessica Jones.
But they also canceled all those.
Yes. So
I'm taking my compliment back.
Put them on Disney Plus. Was that like an acquiescence sort of thing?
Like I doubt we'll see those again.
Yeah,
which sucks because Daredevil is quite good, and I like Jessica Jones as well.
Vincent D'Onofrio as the Kingpin again. That's a big bummer.
Yeah,
and I mean, I loved everything Jessica Jones touched on in terms of that character.
So did I. And also, season 2 of Iron Fist was quite a turnaround from season 1.
Didn't touch on it.
Yeah, season 1
I didn't have Netflix at the time.
Season 1 is bad, but season 2 is quite good, and it ends in a really cool comic booky way. I am kind of happy that Sony is going to hold on to him, and Stan Lee's one of his family said something like, we don't want to just like give everything to this giant monolith that is Disney, and we want people who are going to honor Stan's legacy and whatever. Not that Marvel doesn't do that, but Marvel is like a machine of success.
Because
Disney is like a machine of success,
right? But they also, like you said, going back to the crayons between the lines, use the colors, but they have to stay between our lines.
Yeah, like they'll make $1 billion making a remake of The Lion King that is perfectly fine, but it does no heart. It has no originality. Doesn't feel like a $1 billion movie. I did like the new Aladdin a little bit.
I haven't seen it yet, also. Yeah. But I saw enough about Lion King to know that I don't
we have enough reasons to give Disney enough money, and I think that they will find a way. If they want to have him in an Avengers movie, they will work out a contract and have him come back for some team up. I'm perfectly fine with him not being in the MCU, seeing as how eventually Marvel has 90% of their intellectual property back, except for the Hulk, Spider-Man, and a few other things.
Right.
That they got the rights to Daredevil back, and what they do, they put him in a show.
Moon Knight's coming. They got Moon Knight.
All this stuff is coming. X-Men and all these characters will start to be rolled in.
That's where you're going to see something interesting, and that's going off on a side thing. Like, people are already talking. Disney has that timeline they put up of things to come.
Yeah, I saw that. My entire wallet. Take it.
Take my money. But the thing I thought about when Endgame ended was like, how about we just put a hiatus on the MCU for a good 5 years and work some stuff out in between? I don't need to see these characters for some time. Yeah. Like it's. I
think the hiatus might be...
Is it our fault or is it theirs? Like, is it our demand? And I say our as the viewing audience. Like, are we now just too impatient and we now need it now?
Look at the memes that came out after, like, Spider-Man was sold back. And I was like, I'm sure a lot of them are just like, oh, they're just funny memes. Mm-hmm. But there is, like, a fan impatience where, like, the supremacy of Marvel and Disney must not be questioned. And, like, I saw it, like...
You've given me such tasty quality. I don't trust...
and it's sort of like to a point to where like it's this giant mega franchise that where like if you're a superhero film and you venture outside of those lines too much, you get run through the mill for it.
In dangerous territory.
QED, when people said like sell DC to Marvel, I was like, that's the last thing I want to happen.
Yeah.
I'm happy that Warner Brothers, for all their missteps, and there are plenty, have all those characters.
An independent voice. That they enjoy
and you're getting a Joker movie with Joaquin Phoenix because of it.
I have feelings about that, but I'll probably
Mark Maron is in it.
Mark Maron is in it. Until it proves me wrong, it seems really highly self-indulgent, but we'll find out. I'm more excited about Robert Pattinson's Batman thing.
Yeah. You're getting a Birds of Prey movie. You're getting a James Gunn doing Suicide Squad.
And apparently Taika Waititi's going to be in that too.
Yeah, he's in talks for a role. And you'll get like these filmmaker point of view, like Man of Steel is like the most beautiful superhero movie you'll ever see. Like it looks unlike anything else. Everything is shot like handheld.
Yeah,
almost.
It's got that shaky documentary vibe.
Which makes it feel very human. And like I don't feel like you would get that from a Marvel or Disney owned Superman film.
It would have to be something. It would have to be something wild and out there. Like, I don't know if you've seen Legion.
I have not, but I've been meaning to. But
Legion as a Marvel Fox property is one of the most. Like, it's impossible to recommend to people because it is one of the most purely strange, psychedelic, psychological, like stylistic things I've ever seen.
Yeah,
like it is so, but it's technically connected to X-Men.
Yeah, and look at what they do with Deadpool. Like like I don't think Disney and Marvel would greenlight a Deadpool movie, and if they did, it wouldn't be the kind of Deadpool movie that we got.
That was so successful. I think they're also looking at the budgets. They're looking at Deadpool being the number one R-rated film for the box office of all time. Yeah, I think still.
Yeah, it's like it's up there. It's definitely like
it was number one for a while. I know that, but
and like for all their like mega success, they're quite skittish when it comes to like taking risks, and they let these other studios make those risks. Like I think the Russo brothers said something about like Batman v Superman helped them be more confident about making a Captain America Civil War because they're like and also like when that movie came out, we also had like X-Men Apocalypse, which is also like a superheroes fighting each other deal.
Right.
So like
it kind of fell under the radar.
I don't think like with all the money Marvel and Disney make, I don't feel like because they've shown their hand because they do have a way of when I watch The Force Awakens and when I watch The Last Jedi, I see like the Joss Whedon-y, Marvel-y sort of we got to have enough jokes, but we got to have just enough of everything to.
There has to be that sweetness,
that tone.
It's a very,
for lack of a better word, it's just
a very
the Disney,
sweet tea.
Yeah, the tone of this, and I see it in all these movies, and I don't want our content to become so homogenized that. The giant group think is sort of like this is good and the other things are bad by virtue of success
of not
and
being
bigness.
That. And I think you probably have seen this all the way through with this. The thing is that it does feel like now because of the massiveness of the Disney, Marvel, Lucasfilms juggernaut that something like Fox or Sony now becomes like the mom and pop store against a Walmart. Where it's like you can go to the Walmart and you'll get good product at a good price that you're going to be satisfied with, but it's so
it will suck up everything else around it.
It takes in everything around it,
and ultimately you will get less content because of that. Like you can say what you want about Disney Plus, but we're getting Falcon and Winter Soldier, and we're getting a Loki series, and Moon Knight, and we're getting, The Mandalorian. That's 4 series. Well, imagine if some of those properties were split up among 5 studios, and they each made 2 things each. Or
if they were released like exclusively to like, this site's going to get this one's going to get to Hulu, this one's going to get Prime.
And I think I think a lot of this comes, and not to mention the fact that Disney has shows on it has a show on Hulu, Cloak and Dagger or whatever. Yeah. And look, a lot of this has to do with the
Netflix had Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah, a lot of this has to do with the success of those Marvel movies and the fact that they are these big, giant things. And I'm not saying they're bad or that they, if there is a competition out there, like whose franchise does the best, like Marvel is winning. But I think if you reward them for winning, like the reward should be that they got the biggest, highest grossing movie of all time or whatever.
Right.
It shouldn't be now we get everything else.
Yeah, it's not like it's not a winner takes all situation. It's a winner situation.
Because Disney
got the year.
Yeah, Disney has bought out Fox. They will probably set their eyes on Sony, and then they'll set their eyes on whoever else, Universal, and then they'll set their eyes on I think the next biggest is next to Disney is Warner Brothers, and when that's done, do you want everything under one giant conglomerate? I kind of don't.
It's something I struggle with a little bit. Because I don't struggle with it a lot on the idea of this monopolization. The monopolization bothers me to no end because once everything has been taken in and now follows a line of rule, artistic expression becomes profit as opposed to expression. But at the same time, I feel like, and we go back to talking about the Snyder Cut, and this goes all the way back, is that some of the I don't want to end up being associated with a retaliatory fan base that also has immersed itself in very toxic points of view.
Yeah, where the second anything doesn't go their way,
the reason why Marvel Disney sucks is because social justice reasons, and it's I don't. I agree. I disagree with that entirely.
That's a human point of view that you're disagreeing with,
right?
Those
now, if you want to look
at
it from the aspect of a giant conglomeration. absorbing everything around, then yeah, that's what we get to look at. I want those people to be paid well. I want those people to get taken care of. That's where you get up on your grandstand a little bit for that. But I don't want to look at it as a boo Marvel, boo Disney, because some people on the same line is like, boo Marvel, do Disney. I don't want to see all this representation.
Yeah. And ironically enough, the people who will make a political argument of like, oh, there's that big women scene in Avengers Endgame, is like they're shoving this social message down our throat. Like, if you're concerned about a giant sort of collective social message, the one thing that would make you more concerned about that is one giant company owning all of your content.
Yeah, it's
if
it's a picky, choosy thing of angry people.
So you'll get one company that gives you all of your content, but you will at the same time complain about like, oh, like all this politics is coming in there, but like you, without knowing it, you have become like a cog in a giant machine that churns out content designed to pander to you.
You just played yourself.
Yeah, in a way. Anyway, that's enough of that. We probably talked about this stuff for way too long. Yeah. Let's talk about I want to talk about Midsommar briefly, and then we're going to talk about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
A24.
Let's talk about a movie that's well-intentioned but not that great altogether. Midsommar, baby.
Ari Aster, his whole oeuvre so far.
This is his second movie, right?
It's a second major feature. He has done several short films that I've not seen, and all of them have kind of touched into some levels of horror or social horror. And I'm a big horror fanboy, and I think that the last...
I dabble.
The last 5 years, I think, in terms of what A24 has put out, and then you get stuff like The Babadook, and has been some of the best horror features we've seen in decades. It's a great decade for horror as good cinema.
Someone who saw Hereditary, it was one of the scariest movies I'd seen in like 5-6 years. The last movie I saw that like fucked me up for that long was like Tusk by Kevin Smith.
I've heard that one's a real body horror, but I've not seen it.
It'll bum you out.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing is so I don't know how much you want to get into like spoilers talking about Midsommar, because
we'll spend like 5-10 minutes on Midsommar, and then we'll get into the juicy bits.
Yeah.
I thought Hereditary was a borderline like a genius horror movie, and I was like, the ending, it's such a great slow burn, and it's such a good job of keeping you on your toes, but giving you just enough information that if you're paying attention, you can figure out what's coming.
And that's something where like, so I found that
also when I saw it, I would look up in the corner of my room just to make sure every time.
That's one thing Ari Aster as a director is so absolutely great at, is he knows how to frame and use lighting and mood to create fear and upset. Him as a script writer, dialogue wise, is excellent too. I think I'm trying to get into a little bit, like, I both love his work. I loved Midsommar. I loved Hereditary. At the same time, they left me cold for some reasons because of one particular thing, and I think it is tone. Not tone in terms of like how the movie feels, but like in both these movies, they are connected with gripping human tragedy, which he is so good at. He is so good at making you...
Which might be the scariest part of Midsommar is the most tragedy.
It's the most gut-wrenching spot is the cold opening of Midsommar. That, ironically enough, by the end of the movie, you feel this great perverse satisfaction, and I'll get into that a little bit.
Sure.
But with both the films, with Hereditary and Midsommar, Aster likes to put you through a kind of theater of cruelty and deal with deep human tragedy.
Sure.
And then the solution becomes the escape from that tragedy is we now want to go into the supernatural, and of course that ends up being a horrifying thing in itself. And I think that I would
say that probably applies more to Hereditary than Midsommar,
right? Because Midsommar's not really supernatural at all.
It's weird and creepy, but it's not super. Yeah,
it's more. It's it's definitely not a ghost
story.
I
feel like he does get you in with a lot of the human tragedy. Like whenever I watched both of those moments in both of those movies. Mm-hmm. I felt very much like I felt a very like not just a sense of like it is pathos, it is a form of empathy for the characters, but I did also feel that like there's a weird perversion in a sense that like sort of in the way the audience will roll their eyes. I bring this back to you in a way like when you watch a movie like Snyder referenced in Watchmen one time that he kind of punishes you for liking comic book violence in a way.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think Ari Aster kind of wants you to be like, yeah, but you want to see her smash her head on the telephone pole.
You're here for and Midsommar touches on that too with any of its body horror. I love horror violence in film, but these are movies where it's like
this could happen to a human being.
Are important.
Yeah, this could happen.
The human body is fragile.
And I think the cynicism comes from that initial outlook where he's like, yeah, like this is what you want, isn't it? But also there's a great moment in Hereditary when I can't remember the woman's name, Toni Collette's character. I can't remember her name was Annie or something, but when there's that dinner table scene about her son, and she goes, like your sister's dead, and he goes, and I know you're in pain, and there's nothing I can do for you. And she says, and he goes, but it just feels like such a waste because it could have brought us together, it could have done something, and it did nothing. That's where I feel like he's saying that's like, yeah, like you are here to watch this stuff, but also realize that this does happen to people, and also it has a way of transforming their lives, and in some cases, maybe like bringing them closer together in a very roundabout, macabre way.
Or in a situation like this, at least with Hereditary, it destroys them because grief leaves you vulnerable.
Yeah.
Because that movie is all about the twist of it is that these were all machinations that had been in play since the beginning.
Yeah, and
it's a Rosemary's Baby situation.
And the theme of the movie is that nobody in that movie has any control over what happens to them. Charlie has no control over the fact that she's going to eat that cake and doesn't know that nuts are in it.
And Nick Wolf's character, or I can't remember the actor who plays the brother.
Yeah, he has no control over if she's gonna make it to the hospital alive.
Right.
And even if she made it to the hospital alive, there's a good chance that she still would have wound up dead somehow.
Right. It's just that it was
the dad as well is like he's the most silent character in the movie.
Gabriel Byrne.
There's a part where
very quiet little performance.
And there's a part when he cries in the car, and I felt so bad for him because he doesn't know what to do because his family's falling apart and he's trying everything he can and there's nothing he can do. The lack of control is a theme throughout that entire movie.
And then when I can't remember the actress's name, she's in Handmaid's Tale, great actress, shows up and then she introduces the idea of the seance. It introduces the horror aspect, the horror aspect we came for, not the human horror that Sideline does, but like you can speak to them, they can do all this. We as the audience are like, oh, thank God.
It's scary and you almost feel hopeful in a way because he moves you along this way. Like when I saw it with my cousin, I was like, oh my God, is this really her long lost son or whatever talking to her or whatever? Like, and I was like, about 25 minutes later, nope. I was like,
nope. This is devils at play.
Yeah, and so I think Hereditary is very great. I think Midsommar suffers from. I'm not going to say like it's a. I think what Midsommar suffers from ultimately is one. I find the supernatural more interesting than like weird cults, and I also think that
I kind of lean in your agreement with horror itself. But what makes Midsommar interesting is, and I thought about this on the way here, is even though it is cult horror, or rather, I think the term better is folk horror. I would say the cult aspect of it is missing. This is more about an idea. This is more about like because the ending of I guess what I found myself that Aster does so weird is your sympathy towards the moral of this community becomes almost weirdly correct in some ways, and I'll get to explaining that in a minute.
Sure.
Obviously, they're also murderous.
Yeah,
murderous
the flaw that I found with this movie is that it is more concerned with conveying a sense of tone than it is with conveying like an elaborate plot that comes together.
Right.
And I think that's if there's a flaw to the movie, and I don't hate the movie, I think Hereditary is the only reason I don't like it as much is because Hereditary is so good that Midsommar feels like
and
a little lackluster to me.
Has something I really love in
horror
movies.
I think it makes the mistake of thinking that something is what makes something horrific is like the violence. There's about 2 or 3 scenes of like extreme violence in Midsommar that are pretty gruesome, but I didn't find them as scary as almost anything I've seen in not just Hereditary, but some other
horror movies.
What makes the scene with Charlie so scary is when she dies, it's not her necessarily, it's the brother's reaction.
Yeah. The camera just sticks and stays, and you follow him until you know what's going to happen. And Aster is so good at getting under your skin.
Like when I see there's a big cliff and there's a big, spoilers for Midsommar, everyone. because we're talking about this real quick before we get into when I see that there's a big rock at the bottom of a giant cliff, like, oh my god, what's gonna happen? And I was like, yeah, they're gonna jump off the cliff and it's gonna be gross or something.
And it is gross.
Yeah.
And Ari Aster loves head trauma. He loves face trauma. He likes watching those things. And it's almost like
I don't know if he likes watching them, but he knows they're visually uncomfortable to look at.
I think there is a part of him where I imagine if you were on set, he would sit there and just be kind of a little bit like, yeah. But it is it is, again, like you said, it feels like a punishment. You came here for this as the viewers, but also you start thinking about it from the characters, and the characters of course, the horror, the most gruesome part of the film, at least for me, is the opening spot, and it's the dread building up in it, to the point where you are like Florence Poe's character, and you want to leave to someplace like that. Like, you want to go on a vacation away from the trauma as well.
Yeah.
But you as the audience also knows that they're going to end up in a situation that's also traumatic.
Yeah, and I think that the Midsommar is mired in a lot of common tropes and predictability from horror movies,
right?
Whereas Hereditary
I didn't care for about
Hereditary is almost, by order of magnitude, unpredictable. In fact, it keeps you on your toes the entire thing. But when they arrive in this, like, village, I'm like, oh my god, you think these weird guys in white, you think they're gonna kill all these weird outsiders who are now visiting their village? Oh my god, that's totally what happened.
And who would have thought? It is a pick off one by one sort of thing, which I thought was like, but going back to what you were saying about Hereditary,
Hereditary is a great exercise in how to build tension correctly. I'd say Midsommar is a great exercise in how to build tension, albeit incorrectly, if you want to look at it that way.
Well, talking about Hereditary being a surprising thing, the one thing that comes to me is one of my favorite horror films, and I think it's permeated through a lot of modern horror, is Polanski's Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah.
And watching it, I'm like, well, this is a typical Rosemary's Baby thing. Yeah. It's literally just the leads are being played by a manipulative and also nefarious demonic cult, and the end goal is the bringing about of a kind of antichrist. And that's what happens in Hereditary. Spoilers for Hereditary.
Yeah.
But the whole Payman thing is related to that, and I found that to be kind of like, I don't know why it bothered. I think it's because the concept of Hereditary was so big that it went with that.
Something that feels so samey.
Yeah, that feels so kind of played. I left me a little disappointed. However, the last 10 minutes of that movie go for something I love in horror, which is going for broke, and it just goes nuts.
Yeah.
Body horror.
As soon as there's naked people standing outside the house, I'm like, something's about to go down. I don't like it.
Talking about looking in the corners, when there's spider crawling, I'm all in. I'm like, all right, this movie's just going to decide.
No, she wasn't spider crawling. She was flying.
I know she flied later, but at one point when she's in the corner of his bedroom.
And then they pan to his face, and you see her go behind him. She's flying.
Oh, it's like she's swimming?
Yeah.
I always thought she was kind of doing like a little exorcist spider crawl.
Yeah. And I think that
either way, not comfortable.
Yeah, Midsommar is a less predictable idea.
But it is a predictable formula.
Yes,
which is like,
whereas it's the opposite with Hereditary. Hereditary is a masterstroke in taking an idea that we all know and doing it perfectly.
Right. And then ending with a bang.
And also people said Midsommar was funny. I didn't find it funny at all. And I found that there were, you can put as many trippy drug sequences in a movie as much as you want. I don't find it, like, when she has her little trip in the bathroom and she sees her sister behind her, like, a lot of these things are put in there for no other reason than to just be like, I mean, I'm sure there are other reasons, but, like, they don't really serve the narrative anyway. They serve to maybe show the deterioration of her character.
I think what it shows, and it's because the psychedelia in it is so, you see, scenes of intoxication in other films so wild and out there. Aster clearly has done his research, and he knows what that looks like and feels like. Yeah. And that idea of somebody, you feel worried for her in particular. Everybody else, they're just like, we're all here technically as anthropology students who are kind of taking in this as a both half enjoying thing, but you're worried for her because it's like she's going to have a bad trip. She's going to remember that trauma, and that fear lingers because they are slowly getting more and more intoxicated and more drugged through the whole thing, but by their consent. Except at certain points.
Yeah.
Like, you know that they are vulnerable, and also their psyche and there is also vulnerable to be played and preyed upon.
Yeah.
Which is something, I think there's one thing about the film that bothers me the most, is that I felt like the idea that this community, that these, I guess, cultists, for lack of a better word, even though I kind of disagree with that terminology, I felt like the idea that they had been lying to them so much betrayed a lot of the themes that I cared about. I was like,
they're absolutely liars.
Yeah, they lie about everything.
The guy, like, oh, your boyfriend left you to get there because we only had one room in the truck for one person. And I was like, if this is a community that's built upon, like, you know, a great sense of wonderful community and all this stuff, then this should be something where that would never be acceptable, right? Especially because you tell people the truth from they're born. It's like, oh, when you reach this age, you have to die, so you can. And I was like. Right. And it also shows that, like...
Which that's based on a true thing. Like, Aster did his work in terms of Nordic and...
Yeah, Midsommar is a real thing. I mean, they don't usually dress like that, but it's like
right. But Midsommar is something that people go to see. But this whole thing of this ancient, runic, archaic kind of thing is... I also felt
the character of Peter. I felt like... Again, he makes these characters liars by virtue of the way they're written in a way. Mm-hmm. Peter's... either he has ulterior motives for getting,
and that's the
character.
Friend that the college friend they had who's this most sympathetic. Yeah, Peter.
And he says, either he has an ulterior motive to get her to this place, to keep her there, to become the May Queen and all that stuff.
Because they don't. Yeah, that totally we never find out more about it.
Yeah, and because there's a part where he goes, oh, I'm sure it'll probably seem a little silly to you. That's a lie. Mm-hmm. He knows that's a lie because he's been living away from this community for a long time now.
He's a sleeper agent.
Yeah, so like he's either
and so was his friend as well.
And the movie doesn't do a good job of making him sinister.
Yeah,
of making him of like making it very apparent that he was lying.
Yeah,
because at no point does the movie make it feel like he's lying,
and that
we know he's lying.
And that is something that bothers me so much about it, and it didn't ruin the film for me, but it felt so. It felt such a betrayal of the emotion in the film and a betrayal of the narrative.
Like something that I would have liked.
There was no comeuppance to the hypocrisy of this group. They are so pious and they are so believing of their truth.
Yeah.
Yet there's no, and I listened to some. I think Aster himself said in an interview about like we want to know more about the details. Like there's so many things that were left out, and he's kind of like, well, that was the point. That's not the point of it. And I'm like, even then, while I agree with you on that,
kind of a cop out. Yeah.
It's like one thing in particular is, and this is going into the plot of the story a little bit, is when I can't remember character names, but the guy who's in The Good Place, who's the guy who's making the actual thesis.
Yeah,
he's like, I want to look in that book that Andre, or the product of all the incest and everything, the grotesque in it, because that's something that Aster seems to really like, and that's kind of a problematic thing, is that he has someone of a disability and they're just kind of seen as the only thing that's nefarious, and it feels really weird, but they do nothing with that. It's like he writes
he's just
book.
There and he looks kind of gross.
He's there and he's deformed. And that's creepy.
But in the trailers, he's kind of featured as like, I always thought like, oh, did someone do something to this person? Like, what happened here?
And I thought
I think the problem is he misleads you for no reason.
Yeah,
for the sake of misleading you. Whereas in Hereditary, he misleads you for a very specific reason.
Big impact.
Yeah. And it feels aimless. The ultimate goal feels aimless. Well, here's an example of something I would have liked. I would have liked to have seen that Peter was clearly lying, and I would like that to become more apparent as the movie goes on. Mm-hmm. And when he holds what's her name, Florence Pugh's character's hand, it says, he likes him and he's my friend. Like, but do you feel held by him? Do you feel comforted by him? I'd like for his intentions to be more nefarious, and maybe he wants to be with this woman, and he's more than willing,
and more like, I know at the end of this, all these other guys are going to be gone, and it's just going to be you and me.
To show that this cult, although has these wonderful lofty values, at the end of the day, they are still like. They are still susceptible to the same hubris and the same evils that they would see in outside society. So they become like this well-intentioned, like, commune of hypocrites in a way.
And the hypocrisy goes unpunished, and that feels emotionally.
And maybe like you could do it as like in the movie, as she discovers that he lied to her, like, oh, you didn't think this would be weird? These people just jumped off a cliff. And as she like as she opens up those parts of the movie, you can see that maybe as her sort of mind starts to break a little bit, then she kind of becomes with him anyway.
Right.
And it becomes a gross, sort of serious, manipulative relationship where she thinks she's in love.
And
she
it could
found
be this
people
kind
that
of
could be her-
mirroring with what's happening with her actual boyfriend who's getting pulled in the other direction.
Yeah. And it feels like a bunch of great ideas that are just sort of shooken up in a jar and kind of thrown where they may be.
I think
like
it is
there's a bear there, and the bear's like
the bear comes back in the end.
Yeah, it does come back, but to what end? Because we're told there's a ritual that requires the bear. And
at that point, it just becomes we are at that point the audience of we just take whatever grotesqueness they send us. I actually really enjoyed that last scene. The one thing I'll say is like, I think it is a problem of formula meeting a story's themes that are so important, because what I did walk away from from Midsommar loving is that what it said about grief and how like Americans deal with grief. You know, we're told very much to comfort ourselves independently, find our own inner peace and everything. And this community in Midsommar, they suffer together, they have joy together. And in the end,
there's definitely an undercurrent of like family through there. She loses her family, and she gets a bigger one at the end.
And that's,
I would argue, a worse one at the end.
Right. But the scene at the end where like, and this is the big spoiler, when they burn the whole thing down and everybody's gone and she's the May Queen, and one of the guys in there realizes the pain and he starts screaming and they all sob with him. I felt emotionally moved by that, and I was like, this is what Aster's getting at, is that in a way, and that's why I was like, this is a very perverse sympathy, or that I like this concept of this, like, your suffering now no longer has to be suffered alone. You now can suffer and emote as a family, as a unit. But at the same time, it's ruined by the idea that these people are, even if they were sacrificing people, you can still change it up to be like, for the greater good. But the fact that they lied and are hypocrites kind of makes it not gross in like a way that's good, but gross in a way it's inconsistent.
Yeah, if you had the courage of your convictions, you wouldn't lie about it. And I also felt that was like kind of subversive and sinister, is that they told him you won't feel a thing, and he feels a thing, and they lied to him again. So I was like, I feel like.
And it may be also the American lens of like, I want retribution done against the hypocrites. Like, I was hoping there'd be a point where someone would turn on them and they would get something, but they didn't go that direction.
I didn't want that at all. I kind of knew no one was going to make it out.
Right.
But like, I just felt like I wanted the macabre to have a purpose, and it feels purposelessness.
It feels like appropriating a lot of imagery for the sake of tone, of strange imagery.
Yeah, as opposed for the sake of tone, as it was.
But still gorgeous looking film, great soundtrack.
Yeah, great shot composition, cinematography, all that stuff.
It's definitely one I want to watch again and kind of take in again a second time. I've had some people come talk to me about it, and from their own personal experience related to grief they've had in their families, where they said that I found it to be surprisingly cathartic.
Yeah.
And I was very, I think it's through the lens of how you approach this movie.
I feel like for a movie that is about like it's a glorified breakup movie in a way.
Which is what he says, and I agree with him at the same time.
I feel like the reasoning behind their breaking up is like, it's very pitiful, because like the worst, like, he's not a nice man, but what's the worst thing you can say that he does is he planned to go on a trip without her, and he was thinking about like exiting the relationship,
and he pulled it and kept it going, and then they had a tragedy, and he decided, I need to stay with her.
Yeah, and I was like, his ultimate comeuppance for being like he stole a guy's idea for his paper.
That felt weird,
weirdly added.
It was like all of a sudden, I felt that they just automatically made him into this kind of low-key sociopath in the middle of the movie, and it's like there was no build up to this at all.
Yeah,
it was just this desperate need for me to hate him.
There's one part in the movie. There's one part in the movie where they say like, "Oh, you're working on your thesis." Like, "Oh, I'm still thinking about stuff."
Yeah, and he just pops up to him and just says, "I think I'm going to do the thesis here," and he's like, "That's bullshit, man."
Yeah, and I
agree. I'm like, this is bullshit script.
And I feel like if you want to make him like, I feel like maybe Ari Aster was like, well, if I just make him a skirt chaser who wants to fuck everything,
right,
that's going to be maybe too predictable. But I would feel like if you do that, then you would really have the opportunity. Because the idea is like if the idea is to break Florence Pugh's character and to really break her like psychologically to where like again like if you had Peter be more sinister, if she walks in and sees her having like him having sex with that woman or whatever, and she feels like, oh, he is never there for me. Everyone's right about him.
Comes in and just like comforts her, and that becomes this kind of like. I have been working my own machinations in regards to,
and maybe she will feel like it's earned. She'll feel like his death is something that he earned, and that this is a better place, and she should be here because these people care, and he doesn't give a shit. Right. It just all feels like there are these nebulous ideas that are floating around above your head, and you can almost grab onto them. And we've talked about this too much. We need to talk about what's not time.
And today also they gave the trailer that they're going to do the director's cut. The extended cut for Midsommar, new scenes, deleted scenes, expended scenes. So that may shed some literal light on a very heavily lighted film.
Yeah,
but
the movie's maybe like
it's a long one. Yeah. But I will say this: it's not boring in the slightest. For a movie that's almost 3 hours long, it went by at a clip. I was very surprised.
Yeah, and it holds your attention. I just don't know why it holds your attention.
He's and this is one thing.
I mean, I know why. It's because he knows how to like.
He knows composition. He's a great editor, but I will say
thematically, I don't know why it holds my attention.
And I've heard Astor say that his next feature is not going to be a horror. And I think that'll be interesting to see what he does with other genres. That he's like, I am not a career horror director. I am an auteur that likes to do other things. And I think, and I'll be excited to see.
Do a science fiction movie.
Yeah, I think he said he wanted to do a musical. And I'm like,
about it.
We'll see what happens. He's like, I still want to do drama and everything, but I want to do a musical. And I'm like, don't do an opera. There's all kinds of that.
Sure, yeah.
So speaking of journeyman, or not journeyman, but auteurs.
Auteurs who do what they want.
Talk about
Tarantino, baby.
The king of American auteurs, baby, and his.
Hey, you did my thing. It's my thing.
Well, that's Tarantino's thing as well. Like he's like, yeah, man, baby, I've got the swords and everything.
So
Once upon a time in Hollywood.
I'm gonna sum up my thoughts on this movie. I'm gonna see if you agreed with them.
Okay.
I thought this movie was for the most part good. It is held. It is basically a pointless movie that is held together by great dialogue and good storytelling, but that ultimately feels like, what was the point of what I just watched at the end of it? Did you feel some of that?
I can see how someone would feel that way, except I understood what the point was, which sounds so. I understood what the point was, which is that this is a movie that is Tarantino's love story to his love letter to his own influences of his childhood. And I'm going to say that because it is completely centered around the forgotten Hollywood.
Sure.
He just relishes in it. The movie spends so much time relishing in the imagery, relishing in the style, relishing in the people, but it's not a glamour thing. It's not like, it's not glossy. It's just real.
This reminds me of the movie it reminds me of the movie Hail Caesar by the Coen brothers,
which I didn't get to see.
I'm getting really tired of very well-to-do, rich movie directors making a movie about can you remember when Hollywood was great?
Was this kind of Hollywood?
I remember it was this kind of Hollywood. It's a movie about ourselves. It's like a movie about what we like about ourselves. It feels weirdly narcissistic. I'm not saying it is narcissistic, but it feels narcissistic.
I can see how you feel about that.
Yeah.
With Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, that usual where's the golden age? This is so specific to an era of not just Hollywood, but low rent film world that not a lot of people know about. That must have been something he sat down and watched, because it is specifically focused on the end of the Hollywood serial Western, Italian Westerns, B movies, all
Spaghetti
that.
Westerns,
and he's like, this was a beautiful world that was going away. And then, of course, he brings it all together saying this end of this kind of earnest character actor, hard-nosed serials died with the 60s, which died with the Manson killings.
Yeah, and he doesn't let's keep it spoiler free for
let's keep it right, because there is some.
We'll talk spoilers in a little bit. Let's trace the movie. This movie is about actor Rick Dalton, who used to be on FBI and all sorts of stuff,
right?
And
who's inspired by a lot of different other actors like Tab Hunter and guys who were in shows like The Rifleman.
But Rick Dalton
Will Travel.
Yeah, well, Rick Dalton was a real person too, though.
I think so. Yeah,
he was in Nebraska Jim. Like that's a movie that's in this movie. If I'm not mistaken.
Oh, okay. So, I know that there's lots of characters in it that are real people, and that the show that he's on at one point, that's getting into it later, is a real show.
Yeah,
that Timothy Oliphant plays the real actor who was in that.
Yeah. So it follows him and his stuntman / turned driver, played by Brad Pitt, and it basically follows the trials and tribulations of him feeling like a washed up actor, trying to still make it in Hollywood and stuff. And it juxtaposes that with like the Cultural Revolution leading up to the Manson murders. Mm-hmm. This movie is like, it has all the things I like from a Tarantino movie. It has good dialogue. It has
great music.
A great sense of storytelling, great music. Great cameos by like, you know, Kurt Russell's in it for
Kurt Russell's in it. Kurt Russell narrates it.
He narrates it too.
You've got he throws in people who he clearly it's like Luke Perry's last film before he passes. He's got a great little spot in it. Yeah. Or Timothy Oliphant, Margot Robbie, of course, I think, who's a major player in it, but I think is kind of a sideline compared to these two major characters. They represent Rick Dalton and Brad Pitt's character, Cliff Burton, Cliff Baker.
I don't know.
I can't recall. I think it's Burton.
Cliff Burton's the Metallica bass player.
Oh, I think it is. Then it's Cliff Baker. I think represent the summing up of the end of that Hollywood era of the tough guy lead and his punching man. You know, and they have this intimate relationship, this deep friendship that is so enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, let's talk about the good of the movie. I think the good of the movie is like character interactions, good dialogue, and it's a relatively long movie, but it doesn't feel terribly long.
It goes by at a clip, considering that it's such a for one thing, Tarantino loves his music, but one thing that stood out about this is all the music is non-diegetic. All the music comes from a source. Like either it's in a TV show, it's on the radio. It's also, the movie could be completely silent except for those things. Yeah. And I felt that that's so different. That's one thing is this movie feels and definitely does feel very different from his other movies. Yeah. In some ways. Yeah. I think the only thing that comes close to me is, and I made a post about this, is Pulp Fiction comes to mind in some way because it's just a following of plots that you can pick up at any time while you're doing like the laundry. Yeah. And that to me is a positive.
That's true. And to me, it might be a negative because the through line of Pulp Fiction is that there are like things that we're focused on. This movie feels a little reminiscent of Inglourious Bastards in a way that it might, quote unquote, spoiler alert, might rewrite history.
Yeah, there's a bit of that, and also it is kind of jumps between all these characters. Inglourious Bastards, just for a side note, that's my favorite Tarantino.
Yeah, but the thing about Inglourious Bastards is it has a goal that you are focused on,
and you're in a setting that is action heavy. You're in the middle of a war.
Yeah, and a mission that you are told that this is what we're going to do, and we follow these characters to trying to do that. Whereas here we aimlessly follow a plot of people who don't have anything to do, and it's loosely tied together by a
historical event,
by the what would be the Manson murders.
Because the other big plot thing is while this is happening, also in this drive next door, they moves in is Roman Polanski and Sharon Tate, played by Margot Robbie, and
who does a good job at being like the innocent girl next door and stuff.
She's so delightful. Yeah, there's been a lot of criticism, and I think there may be some that she doesn't have many lines and doesn't have a lot of dialogue. But
just like Sharon Tate.
Just like Sharon Tate, she is such a joy to watch. Yeah, I love her as an actress. She's has such good energy, and like going back to Suicide Squad, she's one of my favorite things about that. Yeah. Is that she makes choices. She's got and it's very clear Tarantino gave her so much love in it. Like you love her, and I think that's the point, is that you love her tragically because you're like, I know what history has in store for her.
And what I find frustrating about this movie is that there are parts of this movie that are designed. I don't think Tarantino designs it to trick you. I think he does it because he thinks it's good filmmaking, and to a degree, it might be good filmmaking.
Well, there are certain scenes in it that I've heard people argue: are they real or are they dream sequences? I
think they're all real, and I think they just feel irrelevant and like a man playing his violin to hear himself play, and not in a good way.
I think there's some plot. The one that comes to my mind is there's a scene where they're shooting a thing, and Timothy Olyphant comes up to Leonardo DiCaprio, and he says, "Oh, weren't you supposed to be in The Great Escape?"
Yeah, you see The Great Escape with his face.
And then it cuts to a digital thing
Spoiler
where
alert.
Steve McQueen's face is on there, and it's Leonardo DiCaprio's thing, but you're not sure if it's him just imagining it or if it was a forgotten screen test.
No, I think it's definitely not a screen test because it's from the movie.
Right.
That is The Great Escape. They just somehow superimposed Leonardo DiCaprio
but
in there.
I wonder if it meant like that reel now is like got burned somewhere.
Oh, I can tell you that's just supposed to be him imagining what it would have been like if I was in The Great Escape instead of Steve.
I kind of took it the
McQueen.
other way, but and Steve McQueen shows up in it, played by Damian Lewis, and that's
from Band of Brothers.
Yep,
good for him.
And
there's a scene in this movie where we see these hippie chicks sort of strolling about town, looking pretty and stuff, and there's a scene where Brad Pitt keeps seeing the same one over and over again. And there's eventually a scene where
Brad Pitt's whole goal in the film is kind of you're more or less following his adventures. He kind of pulls you through the plot while DiCaprio's character pulls you through his character.
Yeah,
because his whole plot is just like I'm trying to stay relevant, so my agent has gotten me these gigs.
Yeah, did you find little sidetrack? Did you find Brad Pitt's character? I got more uncomfortable with him as the movie goes on.
How so?
I will explain this.
Because there's one scene in particular that makes you weird to him.
It changes the way I see his character entirely. Like, I feel like a lot of people, when they reviewed this movie, saw him as like he's a rugged James Dean devil may care, and I saw him as a man who doesn't really know how to function without being violent.
I think that's also, I don't know whether that could either be a criticism of the way that Tarantino is directing Pitt, because he's just absolutely enjoyable to watch in it. But you're right, there is an undercurrent of like he's a loaded weapon, because it's not really a spoiler, but they bring things up in it that he's a war veteran.
Yeah,
he's clearly like a World War II veteran.
And he may have a sordid past. We'll keep it spoiler free.
Right, he has some kind of sordid past related to violence, but all the while you see him, he's got this very maintained lifestyle. He at the end of the day,
he's got a dog. He makes mac and cheese.
He makes mac and cheese. He sits down and watches TV, smokes a little weed, and he does about his thing. And he's just a yes man. But we also see little bits where him being a brick of a person has clearly caused trouble in his relationship with Hollywood, and thus his relationship with DiCaprio.
And I think it negatively affects him, but it's just like he's been this way for forever.
Yeah,
I found him unsettling, and I'll explain to you. This is not. We'll go ahead and get into spoilers with this, because this is the big scene that really frustrates me, even though it's all well done.
Because that's the other thing about talking about this movie, is that what you described at the beginning, what this film is about, it's about the characters. That's kind of the plot.
Yeah,
the plot is these characters.
And if you're not on board,
also,
if you're not on board, it will feel kind of aimless and like searching for itself.
You're waiting for the punchline of the film, which is the Manson killings.
Yeah,
that's coming.
Yeah,
that's been that's the threat throughout. But for the most part, at that point, you are invested in Rick Dalton. If you are invested in him or not, it depends.
I actually liked his character a lot.
All the scenes where they're filming an episode of a TV show
was great.
Is some of the best acting I've seen DiCaprio do in a long time.
Yeah, and
playing a character who is desperately trying to show that he's relevant,
and that he's good at what he does, and he wants to feel good. Like I practiced my lines, I practiced them, and now you forgot them,
and you feel like.
Let me tell this Brad Pitt thing, because this is the crux of it for me.
I didn't think about this.
There's a part when the hippie chick is in his car and they're going to the place where he used to shoot his show.
Right.
And this is where the Manson people are living at, the whole Manson commune.
He goes to Span Ranch.
Yeah. He goes there. He says, I can't remember the guy's name. Is Bill around? I'll call him Bill because I can't remember the name of the character. Played by Bruce Dern, the old guy.
It's George Span, who's the who really owns Span Ranch, which was a Hollywood shooting site before it was acquiesced by the family.
Okay, so he goes to meet them, and it's like roughly like a 15-minute long scene, if not more. And it's shot real well through like a little tracking shots here and there.
You get a couple of cameos in there. Dakota Fanning is in it, and Lena Dunham is in it.
Throughout this scene, like he meets everybody, and they're all like, "Oh, let me see, Rocket's back or whatever her name is."
Tex is there, and they're all real people. They're all like Linda Kasabian and Tex, the people who were actually.
But Dakota Fanning's character keeps saying, like, "Keep an eye on this dude she brought back. Yeah. Keep an eye on him." and stuff, and let me know if he gets closer. And he starts, is George around? He keeps asking, is George around? Where's George? Where is the audience?
I grew up with it. I worked on his set.
Yeah, we're going,
I want to see George.
And as us, we're sitting here wondering, like, oh, who's this George person? Is something going on here? Something to miss? We know these are probably, if you're paying attention a little bit to the culture, you know these are the Manson murderers. So
and
I'm
also
sitting here watching.
The scene becomes very tense.
And you're sitting here watching what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And we're following Brad Pitt, and he's going, all right, is he in that house over there? And she goes, yeah, that's where he is, but it's nap time. We can't bother him. Nap time. Well, that's convenient. We as the people in the audience are meant to go, oh, it's convenient that it's nap time. Is something unsorted going on in this house?
With
Brad
the
Pitt
most
thinks the same thing.
People in American history.
Yeah, he walks up the stairs. Everyone else gets out. Dakota Fanning meets him at the thing, and Brad Pitt, again, sort of using intimidation to get what he wants.
And he's framed as a giant built dude. Like he's cool as a cucumber throughout the whole thing, but he's a dangerous weapon.
Yeah, and I think Tarantino wants that to be a point of pride that you like the character because he takes no prisoners or whatever.
Right.
I find that as something that was very troubling and that doesn't portray him as a particularly great person.
As a likable, good person. Because he's also existing within the frame of that cultural reality, which is not the cultural reality we live in.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's a perfectly fair point. And he walks up to the door and he goes, all right, well, I need to make sure George's here, that you guys have permission to be here. And he taps on the screen door, is not going to stop me. And so she kind of gives him a hard stare, and she goes, fine. She opens up the door, and he walks in, and it's almost shot semi-horror movie-ish.
Yeah. Oh, it's the closest thing to, it's those moments it recalls.
It gets tense. You're seeing like shots of like gross dog food that you'd see in like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
I was just thinking that,
and
because
like
the Span Ranch still looks like the Western set that it was, but now it's deteriorated and it's just kind of a ghost of its former self.
Yeah.
The tension reminds me a lot of the beginning of Inglourious Bastards with Christoph Waltz coming in and being like, and interviewing
but even more uncomfortable.
Right.
And you're meant to think something's going down. Whereas first I was just like, oh, this is lovely dialogue from Christoph Waltz. Like, oh, there's dudes under the floorboards.
Right. And it's like you get introduced to his character. And this, in a way, is also an introduction to the dark side of Brad Pitt's character.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that happens earlier, but let me finish. Because we're in spoilers now. It's implied that he killed his wife. Heavily implied that he killed his wife. It
takes some references to the death of Natalie Wood a little bit, with and you don't see it happen, but it suggests enough that he might have done it.
And given the way they portray the character, I would say it is Tarantino's idea that he probably did kill his wife.
Right. It gives no punishment to it whatsoever. It's just that's what happened.
Yeah. I think it's pretty clear that, like, I would say in that circumstance, Tarantino was like, well, maybe this guy's not the best person.
Right.
Yeah. So
because he's like, I'm going to make you endure this character with an actor.
Because
that is
before I saw
him.
that scene with him and his wife on the boat and the harpoon gun pointed at her,
on there,
and I was like, oh, he's a nice devil may care guy. He's hardworking. He drives Leo DiCaprio. And then that scene happened. And I'm like, oh,
yeah. And everyone knows it. It's also like that dirty secret. Everyone's like, because it affects his career. Cutting to another scene, controversially, with Bruce Lee, played by Mike Moe.
Yeah.
We can get to that later.
Yeah. So he walks up to he's in the house. He goes, where's George at? He's in the back. It's nap time. He goes in the back, finds Bruce Dern. And I was expecting as he opens the door, he's going to get shot in the face or something.
Right. Or he's dead.
I'm expecting some big payoff. They sit down there. They have a weird kind of weirdly acted conversation about, like,
old ass Bruce Dern.
Bruce Dern
being like, leave me alone.
Is he senile or pretending to be senile?
Right.
I can't tell. And they talk about it. And he goes, I'm just trying to make sure you're great. He's like, thank you. You've made my day. And I get the fuck out of here or whatever. Yeah. And he leaves. And then as he leaves, he goes, all right. And they're all sitting there, and there is no real payoff. There is a payoff, but it's kind of a bullshit payoff. He goes there. They don't like the fact that he kind of bulldozed his way into that house to find George.
Right,
and
so they stick a knife in
switchblade
in
his car.
Rick Dalton's car.
Yeah.
And so he's like,
and how does
it's you.
And how does
You're going to fix it.
And how does he respond to that?
He beats this man senseless.
Yeah, he beats him pretty good.
You're going to have to fix that car. And then this hippie, who's a real person, comes up to him and is just like, fuck you, man. And he's like...
He rocks him.
He destroys him.
Yeah.
And which is sort of the beginning of some of the hints that this is going to be an alternate timeline. But
yeah,
we'll get to
I don't know
later.
if that story is based on anything that could be true, but I felt Tarantino was doing a very good job of how to build tension and stuff, but I felt it was all for bullshit. And I felt like I was like, what was the point of this scene? Like, to get across the idea. The movie's plenty long. Is he just doing it to sort of... I mean, he can do kind of whatever he wants. When he goes in to make a movie, they don't give him any limits anymore, and he does what he wants.
Right.
So
and I agree with you in that, especially since most of his other films are pretty consistent in terms of every scene matters. With this one, I feel like it does one thing, which is establishes further, this is Span Ranch, this is the family... These are people who are real, and some of them have passed, some of them are still in prison, some of them are. But I think there is that they're setting that up. They're connecting that George Span has some connection with that, but it definitely is showing a little bit more of who Cliff is.
Yeah, I think but aside
like
from
you said,
that,
an uncomfortable potential time bomb of a person.
And the fact that he first of all, I want to know if that Bruce Lee story is based off anything that was real, because I don't know if the Bruce Lee fan base is gonna be like,
well, the Bruce Lee family also was kind of not big into it, but I also found that scene to be very weird, but at the same time a lot less offensive than I thought it was going to be. Mike Moe plays Lee very well. Yeah. And he's got the dialect down, he's got the look down, and also it's like
my fist on lethal weapon. Like when he did that, I was like, very good.
And he's sitting there talking about like boxing and his respect for like
Cassius
Clay. And
I did find it to be a little bit of like a man pretending to be Bruce Lee's ego rather than Bruce Lee.
And it's like, you could probably argue that it's like, well, this is Green Hornet Bruce Lee. This is before he really was a big deal. Like, he's just getting into things. There's a great little moment. Like, I don't think the film is disrespecting him, because you see a little moment where he's training he's training Margot Robbie because she's in a Matt Hammer film, not Matt Hammer, she's in a movie that the real Sharon Tate was in, that was a kind of kung fu-ish
movie.
And
he's her stunt helper.
Matt
He's
Helm.
helping her, yeah.
There was a series of films, the Matt Helm series, which were a knockoff Bond thing, where it's like swinging spies around the world fighting against international babes and things like that.
Do you think that Tarantino, because he did Kill Bill, he likes martial arts, and he likes martial arts movies and stuff.
He loves it.
Why would he put that in there? Because if that story didn't happen, it means he deliberately frames Bruce Lee as sort of an egoist who is more smoke and mirrors than he was an actual badass.
I think that is very interesting.
Do you think it's to make Brad Pitt's character look cooler?
Yeah, a little bit. I think it's a little bit to show that that's the kind of character Bruce Lee's character, not Bruce Lee, but Brad Pitt's character is that he ain't, because it's also a payoff for the end of the film in that he's no joke as far as being a lethal weapon. He can kill someone pretty easily.
Yeah.
But it does seem kind of like, okay, it feels weird that we're doing this to one of the most celebrated martial artists of all time.
Yeah.
Who broke through racial barriers and everything to be one of the great legends of athleticism.
Yeah.
It does feel kind of odd, but I don't know. Tarantino won't give you an answer. He'll just be like, I disagree with what you're saying. And it's very hard to kind of understand what he's getting at.
Yeah, I just felt like, why would you have Bruce Lee get beat up?
Yeah,
and also
real brutally.
Yeah, and
other than the show,
you get the sense that he knows how to fight.
Right.
Like, you get the sense that he is a martial artist, but is Brad Pitt a martial artist?
No, he's a brutalizer.
Is he just a guy knows how to fight? Because I feel like
Bruce Lee. Also, the punchline of the Bruce Lee thing is it's set up that when they're doing the show, Kurt Russell's character's there and everything, and
he doesn't want Brad Pitt's character to be his stuntman because he may have killed his wife and he's a loose cannon on set, and both of those things kind of are
right, because Zoe Bell shows up,
who is great. I like
amazing.
I
love seeing her. Everything. She's one of the reasons why Death Proof is also one of my favorite Tarantinos.
Yeah.
She shows up and it's just like, you banged up my car. Yeah. And then they just sort of leave it at that. And there's a great comedy line where he's up on the roof and he remembers it and he just goes,
fair enough.
Oh, fair enough. That's right.
Yeah.
It's just like, okay, we get why he's not on set.
Yeah.
Why his career is ending.
And to be fair, I'm not saying that it's not Brad Pitt's fault that I feel these things about his character. It's just in the story. He does a great job playing him, and I feel like
it should be mentioned, as how extraordinary it is that DiCaprio and Pitt are in the same movie together as leads, and their chemistry is spectacular.
Yeah, and as he plays a long lost soldier of fortune kind of well,
a born in the wrong time period kind of guy who's just
The ultimate thing I agree with almost everything you're saying. By the end of this movie, and let's go ahead and skip to the end twist, and we'll talk about some more
because
and wrap it up.
And before we get there, I want to bring up one quick thing.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
And that's there is a time skip and all that, but I would say that everything before the time skip I love to death. I could watch over and over again. I love
before he goes to Italy.
Before he goes to Italy, before he decides to do the
spaghetti Western, which revitalized his career.
Right, he becomes a cult hit guy, and they end up going back. I cannot love the scene enough where he's filming the pilot episode of that thing. That is a masterclass altogether.
Especially when he does the thing with when he first meets the little girl, and he talks about the book, and the book is really a metaphor for him. She's a
professional, right? And then, which that's something interesting. Tarantino, I don't think there's ever been a child in a Tarantino movie except Kill Bill.
Yeah, that's true.
And then all of a sudden they have this sort of thing.
Django probably had like a teenage actors
something going on. It just he's playing with things that feel so much more like wholesome and like a little warmer than what he usually does, which is gruff people. Because this is the closest thing to reality he's done. Everything else he's done is speculative fiction or big fiction.
And ironically,
like
it's hovering near the lower third of his movies for me, somewhere in there.
It's definitely not. I have to see it again, but it's definitely not.
So I find that the movies that he does that are the least like reality are the ones that I like the most. Like Django is one of my favorites because Django is almost like a mythological tale.
Yeah, the character of Django is very interesting.
Also, it's the most wholesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's just
we'll talk about that in a bit.
Yeah,
but
just good killing racists in that.
Yeah, but also there's little moments in Django where like when he sees Christoph Waltz's dead body after like he died to help get him out of that thing, and they have the big shootout. And he just goes, he puts his hand on his like lapel or whatever, says "Auf Wiedersehen." And, this guy who gave him his freedom, and like was the only friend he ever really had, or whatever.
Because I could talk about Django's not high up there for me. I feel like there's some inconsistencies.
But it's not high up there for me either. But it's I like it more than this.
Yeah,
and I think that
I think that's fair.
And I think that it's filled with all sorts of great moments of like human decency in a way, even if it's a brutal movie at times. Like the part where like Christoph Waltz explains to Leo DiCaprio like Alexander Dumas was black, and you like his movies, and you name your slaves.
You like his books, and everything.
But he would consider you a grotesque piece of garbage or whatever. Like little things like that.
Again, what Tarantino does so well is creates good back and forth that creates mood.
Yeah, and he creates a story that is very moral in its outlook. Whereas here, it feels like entirely gray.
Yeah,
and not black.
Aside from, and let's get to the thing that's probably the most talked about thing is that it is an alternate history story.
Yeah. At the end of the movie, the Sharon Tate murders don't happen because I don't think they went next door. I think they went to Polanski's house first.
There was no in this situation. Everything changes because the characters of DiCaprio's character and Brad Pitt's character exist.
Yeah,
their existence leads up to everything we get right now. Yeah. Because basically what happens is everything's supposed to set up except they just had a big success in Italy. Everybody's back. He's got a wife. DiCaprio has a wife and everything. And they're going to have a big old drunk because they decided that that they're going to. But also the parting of ways.
With them, yeah.
He's like, buddy, I think this is the end of our rodeo. Like I think we need to part ways. And they said, well, fuck it. Let's just have a big old drunk. And because of that, the events completely spiral out of control.
Yeah.
And one of them has one of the Manson family that it's all the people who were supposed to go there. They said, let's kill the ones that inspired our violence. So let's go kill DiCaprio. And because they recognize him, he comes out and yells at them and has some hilarious lines,
which was also very like incredible. And I thought for sure like something was going to happen, like he was going to kill DiCaprio or pull.
I thought that was going to happen too. It's very unpredictable, and then
they go in and they corner Brad Pitt's character,
right? And he's had this dog the whole time too, Brandy,
I was 100% certain that dog was going to kill somebody.
Yeah, I was worried the dog was going to get hurt itself, and thankfully it didn't.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was like, this just like him. His dog is also a reflection of a hidden violence.
Yeah, and I think Tarantino thinks it's like, yeah, fuck these crazy people who like killed Sharon Tate, and they're like they kind of murdered the part of Hollywood that I loved in a way. I think it's his revenge film, like sort of like Inglourious Basterds is the Jewish revenge film, and Django is like the slaves revenge film. This film. Is like the forgotten Hollywood actors revenge film.
This is
and I really.
It feels weird because it is kind of like
this was a real person.
These are real people. We are so far removed from the Mansons and the Manson family as a antagonist to our culture a little bit. Yeah. But at the same time, because it basically essentially is Cliff high on acid because he took an acid cigarette from one of the hippie girls who is one of the family members, is tripping and is not intimidated by these guys and essentially just annihilates them.
Yeah.
Brutally murders this man and these two women.
Yeah, in a way that was deeply unpleasant. One part in particular, like he clicks and the dog attacks Tex, which was pretty tame as far as Tarantino violence is concerned.
You get some genitalia violence because the movie is completely non-violent up until this point, except like television fake violence.
Yeah, and the Bruce Lee thing.
And the Bruce Lee thing, but that's not gory.
And when he beats up the guy who hurts his car.
Right, but that could be in any movie.
Yeah,
it's Tarantino's specific.
Yeah,
gore
there's a particular part with a woman, and he's bashing her head on what would be like the mantelpiece above a fireplace.
It's a fireplace,
and it's like a stone mantelpiece.
He turns her head into a cavern, and it's something like that. Deeply upsetting.
Yeah, and I could not have not liked it more, and I liked it less as it kept going, especially with the fact that it was coming from Brad Pitt's character. Mm-hmm. I did laugh when he was like, "What the fuck is going on?" He was tripping out and stuff, and he goes like,
and some of those,
and he was like, "No, your name is Lex or Beck." No,
I'm the devil, and I'm here to do the devil's. Or he's like, "Nah, it's something stupider than that. You're like Rex or something."
Yeah, Tex.
You were riding a horsey.
Yeah,
because he had been to the ranch earlier and saw all these guys.
And I found it very disturbing, and I think Tarantino thinks it's great. And I don't think that I'm not. I guess I'm not a prude. I watch Game of Thrones. I like the violence.
I love and I've argued this since I saw Kill Bill when I was younger. Is that Kill Bill in particular is not a violent movie? It's a bloody movie, but the violence is unrealistic. You know, people's heads get lopped off and they spray a. Yeah, she
uses a ball and chain to kill people. As if that would be practical.
It's a cartoon. It's like literally
that's like
an anime.
He loves the 70s kung fu movies and stuff.
But he also loves gore.
But the violence in this movie feels the most.
It feels very angry.
The most visceral and angry, and it comes from a
place of resentment towards.
A place of resentment, but a place of like a jilted man getting vengeance on these people. And in a way he is, because they did kill people, and there was a terrible thing. I'm not saying it was a bad thing, but or that it was a good thing.
And kind of the same way that Brad Pitt being at the ranch and beating up the guy is a build up to this scene coming. There's a really genuinely enjoyable scene of Sharon Tate going out on a date with herself, and she goes to see the Matt Helm movie she's in, and she's clearly loving that she's on there, and you feel good for her. And I think that
she likes when people laugh at her. She likes when she's the butt of the joke. She likes when she does. There's a part when she's rehearsing her little fight with someone.
With Bruce Lee.
Yeah,
because that's one thing where I'm like, this movie doesn't disrespect Bruce Lee because it shows her doing kung fu with him.
Yeah,
or doing Jeet Kune Do. But I was sitting there thinking this is Tarantino using the Manson murders as a way to say all these her and people like her had such hope and such goodness and such vitality, and they were murdered senselessly. And in my world that I'm creating, that doesn't happen to them.
They would be killed by a brutal man next door with a dog who would rip your nuts off or whatever.
Right. And so it does feel weird because we're now I don't like violence done onto hippies for being hippies, but it's you have to separate them from being. But that's not what happens.
The violence is done on them is because they attack a bear essentially or something.
Yeah,
and it's you made
house.
Yeah, and I was like, the violence felt like not just self-indulgent, but it felt weirdly vindictive. And it's imagine the worst violent scenes in movies or whatever that scarred you. That scene with the fireplace mantelpiece is
it's pretty brutal.
I
mean, just going back to Ari Aster and his love of head trauma. I mean, it's head trauma, and he busts and then there's a kind of great. It's still within the realm of the fucked up, but there's kind of a great moment with DiCaprio where there is a Chekhov's flamethrower.
Yeah, and he punches that girl to the point where she's insane. Like she's like
with the knife and all that. She's with the gun.
Yeah, and then DiCaprio goes in and he grabs his flamethrower and kills her and roasts her. And I was just like. Yeah, it left me feeling weird and cold and empty, and it's not because it's violent. I have no problem with violence. I saw Braveheart when I was like 11, and I kind of loved how
and I don't mind
Tarantino's
violence because it's usually very intense for cathartic reasons. But this is it's not a catharsis that you and I, in our age range, in our culture, are like. We watch the end of Inglourious Basterds, and we're like, great.
Yeah,
I love seeing the
German
High Command
away Hitler's face with a machine gun or whatever.
And I was like, I love seeing the German High Command get gunned down brutally.
But yeah, it's like who is this for? There's a question of that when I was watching the movie.
And it feels like it's a bit of his. That's for his generation a little bit.
Yeah,
and a bit for him.
Maybe.
I agree that it's weird. It didn't bother me as much, but it did feel really purposefully intense for some reason.
Yeah, I watched it with my lady. We both when he was beating up her, I was just like, woof. And I knew it's Tarantino. I knew there's something is gonna happen. He doesn't not do violence in his movies.
Right.
And it was for the longest time, what's his name, Frankie or whatever, getting his ear cut off in Reservoir Dogs was the pinnacle of that is the most gruesome thing I've seen. Yeah. And then it was maybe something in the not the Hateful Eight, but in maybe some stuff in Django was pretty.
Well, there's the Mandingo scene in Django, which is mostly shot outside of itself, but that's still pretty.
The implications are pretty brutal.
There's not much in Tarantino's world where the violence is something that is upsetting.
Yeah, and it's always
because it's usually happening either to bad people,
and it comes from an entertaining place. Where here, I didn't find it to be very entertaining.
I think that's fair.
Yeah. Which is not to say that the only times I like violence in movies is when it's a bad guy or a good guy. There's been plenty of times when I've seen scenes that are really violent and traumatic or whatever, and I was still they were entertaining. You ever seen Last of the Mohicans?
I was just thinking about that movie the other day because I was watching something related to Michael Mann.
Remember at the end of Last of the Mohicans when Uncas climbs up to save that woman and he fights Magua and Magua cuts out his heart and throws him off the edge of the thing? It's brutal and awful to watch, but it's very entertaining.
It's very entertaining. It's very there's a strange.
And then the dad comes sees it happen and just annihilates everyone in his way. It's a great movie.
But I think you're right about it in that, and it would take a second viewing for me because I do. Summing up, and the movie pretty much ends right after that because
he meets Sharon Tate.
They invite him in for a drink,
and they have a nice time.
Jay Seidel or whatever, played by
Emil Hirsch.
Emil Hirsch, which is always nice to see Emil Hirsch in something.
Yeah, what's he doing now?
Well, he's in Tarantino, I guess. But the hint is that because this particular evil has been thwarted, there is now an alternate timeline
where they live
safely. Everyone lives happily ever after safely.
It is what we probably wished would have happened.
Yeah,
obviously.
My sympathy towards the Manson killers is very slim, and watching them die is not the worst thing in the world.
Sure.
But in the time that we're dealing in, where violence done to people in this way, especially when we're so removed from it, it does leave a weird tone, and it's weird because it's Tarantino's going to find some way to defend it.
Yeah, there's there were weird hippie teenagers, and he bashes one of her brains.
Who were manipulated. They were manipulated by an evil man. Manson shows up for 5 seconds.
I'm glad they're in jail, and I'm glad Manson's in jail. I'm glad he died in jail.
He died in jail.
Yeah.
He shows up in the movie for about 5 seconds, played by, I can't remember the actor's name, but he also plays him in the new season of Mindhunter.
Yeah.
Which is a great little weird crossover, but I mostly know him as Dewey Crow from Justified.
Yeah.
Great actor. Even for his few seconds he is as Manson, he is frightening in a very mundane way.
Yeah,
but the movie.
He has a weird fixation on Sharon Tate. He just glares at her,
and he's just kind of "Hey, gross. Man, how's it going?" And it's that he is this mastermind.
Yeah. So and it's weird. Is it that guy? We think about we think about hippies. We think about people that are doing acid and smoking weed and like having orgies or whatever. But like the truth about like that cultural movement could be more sinister in a way.
Well, it is. I think like again, it's separating the hope that came, and that's a whole separate concept about the counterculture thing.
Because this happened all like when this stuff was happening, like Kent State happened, and like the Vietnam War
was raging on, and all the characters who are older men, primarily throughout the film, are like these fucking hippies.
Yeah,
and that's like
it's weird.
It's like these are all boomer characters who are looking at, or greatest generation characters who are looking at them all like that, but in this way, historically, they're right because these are not hippies. This is the Manson family. Yeah. They were the death of the hippie culture.
Culturally, like we look at that and we go like, these guys would probably believe things that were really antithetical to everything that we believed.
They manipulated everybody.
This is a good movie and I liked it and I'm glad I saw it.
It's still Tarantino knocks out of the park again.
Yeah, I probably won't buy it. My one question I ask is like, would you recommend it to a friend? Would you buy it on Blu-ray? And I would recommend it to a friend, but I don't think I would buy it on Blu-ray.
I think I would. I thought about it as going back to like how I think it's a movie you can just put on and have things going on in the background. It would be a movie if I like wanted to have a relaxing evening. I think I would put it on because for the most part, it's a fairly comfortable, easygoing kind of film, except for those tension parts. But that's when you really get your attention.
And I'm not even saying that those parts are bad. They just feel strange, because it feels like like if there was anything I could say about this movie, it's good to what end? To its own. It feels like at this point in his career,
that's kind of how I felt about Django.
Yeah, Quentin Tarantino
is good, but it's politics inside or to what end? And I think Hateful Eight justified that a little bit.
Yeah, and I felt like at the end of this movie, I was like, I feel like Tarantino is now making movies for himself by himself. Mm-hmm. Which is fine. Like I'll still watch them, but I feel like the greatest stuff he's ever made has already been made in a way. Unless he could shock me again.
Unless he does this Star Trek thing or he does all these different ideas he talks about. He says what if it's Kill Bill Volume 3, if it's his R-rated Star Trek, if it's whatever is going to be his eventual final film, because he's very much like it's gonna be my last one, and then it's like he's still like I want to keep doing it.
Yeah,
we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I would very much like to see him do something out of left field.
Yeah, that's why the Star Trek thing interests me, because I would love for him to do a sci-fi.
Because none of his movies feel like that they're... Goodness gracious, Skylar. I feel like I want him to do a movie that... I mean, all these movies feel different, but they also feel like... they're made by him. Yeah, and it's weird to say. I want I want him to make a movie that doesn't feel like it's made by him. I was like, what does that mean?
I think this is the closest to not feeling like it was made by him, because there's so many things that are different.
I feel like it's made by him still. I'm talking about like I would love to see him make like a Viking Age epic or like a science fiction film or something that requires him to do something that he doesn't normally do, whether it's visual effects or just a different scope or a less sort of like cheesy or self-reverential tone.
Mm-hmm. Something more akin to something like Jackie Brown, because Jackie Brown was the only film that he didn't write. He took it from an Elmore Leonard novel, and people still say it has been a long time since I've seen that movie. In fact, I think I've only seen it once, and I need to go back and watch it. Yeah, but good. People have said it's one of his best because it has so little of his indulgences.
Yeah, and I would like to see him like take a style or a tone to something outside of that box and make something else. And I think the closest he has come to those things is like. The further away he gets from modern day, the more I get like interested in a lot of the things that he does.
I loved Hateful Eight.
Yeah, the Hateful Eight is great. It's like 2 hours and 47 minutes long, but it holds my attention the entire time, and I'm like, okay, do this again. Let's do one in the 1600s now. Yeah. Or what about the 1300s or the 1200s
or the 2200s? Let's do sci-fi. Yeah. I would love to see him tackle something like pulp sci-fi. I don't know if I want it to be Star Trek, but
can he work? Yeah, I don't want to see it as Star Trek.
Like if he did like Quentin Tarantino's Galaxy Quest, like it's Star Trek but not Star Trek,
or just do like a dark sci-fi movie where he has to use visual effects just to see if he could do it.
Like I would love if he was like, I'm gonna employ it and make it look like something retro. I'm like, dude, I love retro sci-fi in modern day. I'm all about that. Give it to me. Give it to me.
Yeah.
Give it to me, QT.
And that's everything I have to say about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
For me, going back to it, I would recommend it, but I also would say it's something I would like to own. I would put it on every now and then.
Fair enough.
It's a good one to sit back with like a glass of scotch and just sort of like.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a good movie, but I don't think he's made bad movies either yet. So that remains to be seen. But
he's not made a stinker.
Yeah, we will definitely. You and me will have to do this again. This is my friend Matt McGuire. I don't think I
by the way,
the entire.
I'm Matthew. You'll have to pop me in earlier for that.
Yeah, edit. I'll do an edit point. I'm like, this is my friend Matt McGuire. And then the conversation will continue.
Yeah, I'm glad to be on here. I'll be more than glad to pop up again. Maybe we can get another person in here, do a 3 back and forth, see if where that would
maybe
go.
we've talked about so much stuff. There's definitely plenty of things that we could talk about.
I think we could talk a whole thing more about Star Wars altogether. Leading up.
I would love to do a Last Jedi thing with you and Ryan because you guys would both love.
Ryan's my buddy. I haven't
seen
him since college, but it's been a bit.
Yeah, I had classes with Ryan in college too. He's a hoot. Yeah. And he's definitely great fodder for this podcast to get annihilated by me. But we'll definitely do this again and. This has been the movie date. I didn't do my intro either. God,
you're gonna have to do like I'm not
editing. I'm not editing it in.
Yeah, do a cold open and put it in there.
Yeah, I'm leaving it the way it is.
And thank you, Robin, for having me on board. I'll be glad to return.
Yeah, buddy. This has been the Movie Date Podcast, a podcast where people who like movies but don't want to be too smug about it. I have been Rob. This has been Matt McGuire.
I hope I wasn't too smug about it.
No, and we will definitely have him on again. Bye bye.